Chapter 87. Scylla stared at the cat that was looking at him with disdain. He really did not remember reading about cyborg life forms that could speak. However, it could also be because he had not come into contact with the real core content of the research. In any case, this kind of life form was really amazing. I didn't expect you to be able to speak. I learned it more than 100 years ago. The cat raised its hand, raised its paw and pointed in a direction. I remember there weren't that many buildings back then. There was only one landing spot on the entire planet. This planet was allowed to be open to hunting by the League of Stars more than 100 years ago. At that time, there were indeed not many human buildings. The direction that the cat's paw was pointing at was where their aircraft had landed. I didn't expect you to live for so long, Scylla lamented. Of course. Although I don't know how long I can live, it feels like I haven't grown much after all these years. Hui Mao was very dissatisfied that Scylla doubted its lifespan. Then what happened to you just now? Was that sickly and weak state that you were in? Was it an illusion? Scylla said with disdain. There will always be a period of time every 10 years or so. During that period, I will become weak and unstable. These two states are very difficult to control, and I will also emit an electromagnetic wave that will attract many hostile species to attack me. Those wolves just now were one of them. Scylla suddenly understood. So that was it. They were unstable, but that did not mean that their lifespan was short. The short lifespan that the researchers mentioned was actually when they were periodically weak. If they attracted a stronger species to attack them, they would definitely die. The cat was still talking to itself. Before, I didn't understand why I would emit that kind of electromagnetic wave uncontrollably, but now I know that it's to attract that white ball. I don't know what it is, but I know that the white ball is useful to me. It can stabilize this chaotic and unstable state. Scylla could not feel the existence of the white ball anymore. It seemed that the coincidental formation of cyborg life forms also included the white ball. Cyborg life forms that did not fuse with the white ball could change between the two states perfectly, but they would not be able to maintain a stable state. I feel like you and I are the same kind. The cat looked at Scylla. When it came to this world, it knew that it was different from the living beings around it, but now, Scylla gave it a very strange feeling, an inexplicable sense of familiarity. I'm a normal carbon-based life form, a pure human, pure, Scylla affirmed. I know you're human, so I'm just saying it feels like. Sigh, why don't you follow me? Now that I'm stable, I won't be as weak as before. I'm standing at the top of this planet. Not interested. Scylla walked back. He'd better get his bag and look for Diaz and the others. Hey, don't go. Do you want me to follow you? The cat ran behind Celine eagerly. Scylla stopped and looked at the cat. This time, he didn't ask it to stop and let the cat walk in front of him. You want to leave? Yes, I'm tired of staying here. I want to go out and broaden my horizons. You can go find other people. There are many people who come here to hunt, or you can sneak into one of the spaceships and go on a free vacation. No. The cat shook its head vigorously. They're not reliable. Either they're too weak, or their character is bad. Scylla squatted down and looked at the gray cat in front of him seriously. Speaking of which, you did remind me of something. What? I went through a lot of trouble to get that white ball. If I sold it to those crazy researchers, I might be able to get a few $100 million, but you took it from me. No matter what, you have to compensate me. You can follow me, but you have to pay your debt. Pay my debt? Yes. Scylla took out a knife and scratched some numbers on the ground. You know the polar bears on this planet, right? The kind that can sell for about 10,000 galactic credits each. If the money you owe me is converted into polar bears, it'll be no less than 10,000. Of course, some exotic beasts are more valuable. Some are worth more than 1 million each. That way, you'll save more effort. At this point, Sillin paused and looked suspiciously at the cat in front of him, who was staring at the ground and listening to him. Of course, maybe you can't deal with that kind of exotic beast, can't deal with it. It raised its claws. I'll prove it to you. Let me tell you, I've never seen a beast that could withstand 2 of my claws. If it's just a show of swallowing a wolf, then forget it. That's just to show that you have a big appetite. That'll cost me more money. The cat snorted through its nose and looked at its surroundings. Then, it swept its gaze across Sillin once before raising its paw and pointing at its own head. Take out your gun and point it at me. Sillin didn't say much. A cyborg should be very powerful. Who knows, it might really be able to carry guns and block cannons. Bang! A gunshot. The cat was sent flying with a single shot. A gray shadow flew far away. Sillin was speechless. Was this proof? But soon, the gray cat ran over and spat the bullet out of its mouth. The bullet was intact and the medicine inside did not leak out. The most surprising thing was that Sillin had aimed at the cat's forehead and not its mouth when he fired. Right now, the cat's head was perfectly fine, and there was not a single change to it. The bullet, however, had come out of its mouth unscathed. Moreover, this kind of bullet was specially made to deal with large white bears. One shot could break their skin. He didn't expect this guy to be able to withstand it. How is it? Not bad, right? Hui Mao said proudly. You're not embarrassed to be shot away. It wouldn't have happened if I changed forms. Sillin put away the gun and asked curiously, how did you change into these 2 forms? Even the elements changed. A cyborg was a carbon-based life form when it was in biological form, and its elemental composition was no different from that of a normal living being. However, its elemental composition would change when it transformed into a mechanical form. Sillin had never seen a metal like this even though he had worked with Mo Hung for a long time. I don't know. I was born with it. I can easily change elements. It continued to be proud. Let me see it turn into gold. Don't you know what a directional change is? Hui Mao looked like he was teaching. He stretched out his paw and drew a circle on the ground. This is the elemental composition of my current form. He drew another circle. This is the elemental composition of another form. Then he marked a 2-way arrow between the 2 circles. This is the so-called directional change. Sillin said disappointedly, so you can't turn into gold. Hui Mao's ears pulled back. He was depressed. He suddenly felt that he was being looked down upon. Forget it. Just make do. Follow me and slowly pay off your debt. At least you might encounter something similar to that white ball. You can perfect yourself, and you won't be sold to a research lab to be dissected by those crazy researchers. The gray cat was about to refute Sillin's earlier words, but it immediately quieted down when it heard Sillin's last sentence. Actually, it wasn't a bad idea. It was just a few 100 million GAL credits, and a couple of valuable alien beasts. Not long after, Hui Mao realized that he was too naive. Chapter 88. Sillin took out a stack of dark gold items from his bag and started to write. Hui Mao lay at the side and watched, its tail swaying here and there. It knew the common language of the League of Stars, and the dark gold stack clearly said, receipt. That was why Hui Mao was very disdainful when Sillin took out this item. It wasn't going to deny it at all. It's just a few 100 million, is there a need to act like this? What's your name? Sillin asked. There's no need to write, Hui Mao, on the receipt, is there? Hubeilu. What? Hubeilu is the native language of this sector. It's the first language I came into contact with. Hubeilu means overlord. There were originally no humans on this planet, and the first humans to come here were from Sector T itself. That was why this was the first language Hui Mao learned. Later on, people from other sectors also came here, and in the end everyone used the common language of the League of Stars. Therefore, Hui Mao learned the common language later on. Sillin curled his lips when he heard this. Overlord? What a cocky fart. I've only heard of tigers possessing the aura of a king, but I've never seen a cat with the air of a king. Here, it's done. Take a look and see if there's anything wrong with it. If there's nothing wrong with it, just sign your name, or a palm print. Sillin passed the written item to Huimao. Huimao glanced at the number Sillin wrote. It was 500 million, but it didn't think much of it. Without looking further, it raised its paw and pressed a palm print on the paper. Ha, all right. 2 copies, one for you and one for me. So that no one will go back on their word. Sillin passed one to Huimao, but Huimao ate it in one gulp. He stood up, stuck out his butt, stretched his back and shook his fur. Then, Huimao said, we can go now, right? Wait, there's something I need to tell you. Sillin put away the receipt and looked at Huimao seriously. What? Huimao asked lazily. I am now a member of a hunter group. If you want to follow me, you will not be following me as a member of the hunter group, but as the debtor. In short, I am the creditor, and you are the slave. Debt slave? It's so awful. The gray cat flicked its ears and said. Then let's make it a pet. It'll help us conceal our identities. Pet. I'm a dignified. Then we'll be debt slaves. I'll still be a pet. But let's make this clear. Once I pay off my debt, I won't be a pet or a debt slave anymore. Of course. You should be proud to have a pet like me. A dignified, in your words, a semi-mechanical life form is actually being treated as a pet. You have to know that I am. Blah blah blah, Huimao flaunted how special he was, how smart and how strong he was. Through this cat's incessant chatter, Celine knew that ever since the humans had built a stronghold on this planet, this cat had often wandered there. From there, it had learned the language of the Star Alliance, knew how to remember the year, could eavesdrop on the development plans of the humans on this planet, and could simulate the weapons of the humans. This cat was very proud of this. After all, it was self-taught, talented, intelligent, and had outstanding abilities. Sillin shook his head and ignored this guy who was immersed in self-improvement. He took out the hoverboard from his bag, unfolded it, activated it, and left. Hey, wait for me. Huimao kicked its legs and quickly hooked the back of the hoverboard with its claws. It jumped up and then lay on the hoverboard with its eyes wide open, looking at the ground getting farther and farther away. Its round eyes were shining with excitement. When the time comes, don't casually say that you're a semi-mechanical life form, lest you cause too much trouble. Yes, I know. Huimao knew in its heart that the degree of perversion of humans was unimaginable. It was really not easy to find a reliable person, so it had not let humans discover it for so many years. By the time Sillin found Dias and the others, they were more or less done with their work. At that time, the communicator could not be used, and the white bears were all lying on the ground. Although Dias also felt uncomfortable, he knew that this was a rare opportunity, so it did not take much effort to deal with the white bears. Tang Qiuqiu was grabbing Ba Dao's uppermost arm and swinging it. Ba Dao freed 2 of his hands to deal with the animal hide, and the other 4 were for Tang Qiuqiu to play with. Seeing Sillin coming over, Tang Qiuqiu exerted strength in her arm and swung it in the air, doing a light somersault in the air and landing on the ground. Brother Sillin, you're really something. We've already finished the mission before you came over. Sillin laughed and fluttered Tang Qiuqiu's head, purposely messing up her short hair. Tang Qiuqiu did not get angry. She grabbed Sillin's fluttering hand and giggled. How many white bears did you catch? Sillin asked. A total of 7, and I killed one of them. No wonder she was so happy. When those white bears stood up, they were more than 7 meters tall. It was already very good to be able to kill one, let alone a child like Tang Qiuqiu. Not bad, impressive. Not far away, Yudi, Xiaosheng, and the others looked at Sillin in surprise. He had indeed changed his skin. They could not even recognize him. Even his physique had changed. He was more muscular and not as frail as before. Hui Mao was dissatisfied that he was ignored. He jumped down from the hoverboard and walked elegantly to the side to watch the people deal with the white bears. He had eaten countless of these white bears. It was no less than the number of white bears hunted by the hunters every time the planet opened up for hunting. He did not expect that their skin could be sold for money. Sigh, he had to be more careful in the future. He had to divide the parts that could be sold for money and eat the rest of the meat. Hey, there's a cat. Brother Silan, where did you get this cat? Tang Qiuqiu asked as she looked at Hui Mao, who was strolling leisurely in the field. I picked it up. Why did you pick up a cat? It's a kitten. With such a small size, it probably won't survive for long in the forest. You went for a walk just to pick up this kitten? Carrie said. Hearing Carrie's words, Hui Mao turned his head and looked at him with disdain. Yo, that guy actually looked down on me. That was a look of disdain, right? Carrie shouted as if he had discovered another Miantuan chameleon. It's true. Brother Silan, what's its name? Tang Qiuqiu asked. Hubeilu, or Holu for short. Hearing Silan's words, Hui Mao, who was watching with interest as Carrie and Diaz skinned the white bear, was rather displeased. However, seeing that he was the creditor, Hui Mao did not argue with him. Hee, it's really cute. Tang Qiuqiu laughed. What's cute about it? It's gray and ugly. Hearing Silan's words, Hui Mao exploded again. You're the ugly one. You're ugly from head to toe. Carrie, who was skinning the bear, slipped and almost cut his hand. Oh my god, this guy can actually talk. Not bad, we can sell it for a good price. Not selling. Not selling. Silan looked at Tang Qiuqiu. She was the one who said, not selling, at the same time as him. If we want to sell it, those white bears are enough. I'll keep it as a companion for the Miantuan. Tang Qiuqiu treasured Hui Mao quite a bit. Diaz waved his hand. Alright, let's finish what we're doing first. The main ship is starting to rush us. After this batch of goods is done, we'll go do something big. Something big? Carrie's eyes lit up. Boss, are we going to do a 5-year mission? The sixth team had a rule. Every 5 years, they would do something big. It could take half a year, or even 4 to 5 years. If it was a short time, the team members would have a long vacation. If it was a long time, they would not have any vacation at all. The so-called 5-year mission was to report the results to the Vanguard A team. If there were no results, the team's status in Vanguard would drop. On the other hand, if the results were good, the team's status would rise. Chapter 89. A 5-year mission was the standard to measure AB Squadron's overall strength and development. It could elevate AB Squadron into the limelight of the League of Stars in one go, but it could also make AB Squadron the target of scorn and ridicule. This was also Shoten's second 5-year mission after becoming the 6th Division's captain. His previous mission wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. Although he didn't become famous, he didn't tarnish his reputation either. At the very least, it proved his ability as the 6th Division's captain. A 5-year mission was difficult, that was for sure. They might encounter an unprecedented crisis, and no one could guarantee that they would survive a 5-year mission unscathed, not even the captain or the second-in-command. Losing a group of people, but at the same time, training a group of people. The hunter group had grown through such repeated training. Hunters were used to wandering on the edge of life and death all year round. It was precisely because they were used to this kind of excitement and a life of adventure that when they heard that there was a dangerous mission, they didn't show any anxiety or panic. Instead, they showed unbearable excitement, especially the veteran hunters. After receiving Diaz's affirmation, Callie and the others cheered. They didn't have much experience in the previous 5-year mission, and they hadn't enjoyed following behind their seniors. This time, they would enjoy it to the fullest. Thinking of this, Carrie and the others sped up their work. Silan joined in as well. Tang Qiuqiu and Huimao squatted beside Silen and watched as they dealt with the spoils of war. Seeing that Huimao wasn't even blinking, Tang Qiuqiu asked, "Are you interested in this, Huiz? Call me Hubeilu." Huimao was very dissatisfied. "But Huiz sounds friendly." "Friendly?" Huimao was instantly elated. He no longer cared about how Tang Qiuqiu addressed him. However, he didn't mention that he owed money either. Calling him a debt slave was too embarrassing. After dealing with the white bear, everyone returned to the temporary base. After tidying up, they boarded the spaceplane and returned to the starship docked at the spaceport. Huimao walked back and forth on the starship with his tail raised, as if he was patrolling his territory. Behind Huimao, the Miantuan eagerly followed. It was not easy to find a fellow on the ship who was not a human like himself. The Miantuan was still very excited. At least he would have someone to share his fate with if he caused trouble in the future. Although the 5-year mission had yet to begin, the people on the starship were not idle. They checked the food storage, energy storage, weapons, and equipment. They also had to carefully inspect the starship. All the old parts had to be replaced. Since they were going to do something big, they could not afford to make any mistakes. Details determined success or failure. Silen and the engineering team member on the starship were inspecting the starship together. The person in charge of engineering on the starship, Enji, was also an octopus. Unlike Ba Dao, who was robust, Enji was on the skinnier side. Although an octopus was tall, in terms of weight, Enji might not be able to match up to Silen. There were many people like Enji. They would not rush to the front lines of battle but were part of the logistics team. Of course, the technicians who could stay in a hunter regiment were not ordinary people. At the very least, they would not be lacking in courage. Whenever there was a need, they would pick up a gun and go to the battlefield. During the maintenance, Enji and Silen exchanged their insights. Enji really admired Silen as a young man. Although he was young, he was truly talented and knowledgeable. He was able to see through the key points of some machinery's structure with just a glance, and Silen was also able to listen to opinions and suggestions humbly. It was pretty good for someone his age. Enji's 6 arms were busy. Some were holding tools, some were holding parts, and some were holding instruments. Silen was recording at the side. "Alright, this area is done. Let's take a break before we proceed to the next area for inspection." Taking the water from Silen, Enji gulped down 2 mouthfuls. He caught his breath and looked at Silen's recording. Not bad. Very professional recording. Enji was not stingy with his praise. He unfolded a chair and sat down, placing the tools into the toolbox one by one. "Brother Enji, what's that?" Silen pointed at Enji's tool and a small piece of reddish-brown crystal inside. "Oh, this." Enji smiled. He picked up the small piece and handed it to Silen. "Look carefully. Can you guess what it is?" Silen took the small piece of crystal. This small piece was only half the size of a thumb. Resin? Silen could distinguish the main components of this thing. At the same time, he saw a creature buried in the bread. It was less than a centimeter long, and its body was semicircular. It had many pairs of legs and a pair of chelicerae. It looked somewhat ferocious. "I've never seen this kind of creature. There are many kinds of creatures in the universe. It's normal not to have seen one." Enji smiled. "Can you guess where the worm inside came from?" Silen shook his head. Although many creatures could be speculated about their living environment based on their body shape, more creatures could not be imagined. Silen's intuition told him that the creature buried inside was not simple. Enji chuckled. He took the reddish-brown small piece, rubbed the surface with his fingers, and sighed. "This is a parasite." "Parasite?" Silen knew that Enji was not talking about human parasites, but parasites that lived on starships and spaceships that traveled in the universe. "Yes, this is also something we have to pay special attention to every time we repair the starship. We also have to check it from time to time during long-distance flights. Once we find a parasite, we have to eliminate it in time. Otherwise, there will be endless problems in the future. Just a little bit like this can destroy a huge starship. They can withstand cosmic rays, withstand the vacuum environment, and are firmly nailed to spaceships. Many of the substances they secrete can corrode spaceships. Although it is not visible for a while, it will be troublesome after a long time. When it is really discovered, it will be too late. Do you know what will happen if a hole suddenly appears on a starship when it is flying in the universe and there is no time to repair it? Scylla trembled unconsciously. How terrifying. They will also damage some key parts of the starship, whether it is the weapon system, the energy transmission tubes, or some interfaces. They may become their habitat. There are many kinds of parasites in the universe, and their preferences are different. Some like places with active energy, and some like places with oxygen. In short, what we need to do is to check the starship regularly to prevent future problems. Enji flicked the small piece in his hand and caught it again. Every time we do this, we will prepare an embedding fluid. Small parasites like this can be buried in the embedding fluid, just like amber. After the mission is over, we can sell it at a high price to researchers or collectors. Many people like to collect this kind of cosmic parasite. To a certain extent, these cosmic parasites are also very rare. The one in my hand was obtained during the last 5-year mission. This is just one of them. I kept one for myself and did not sell it. It is a souvenir. If you are interested, when we find parasites, we will call you over to take a look when we remove them. That's good. Thank you, Brother Enji. Kid, why are you so polite? Let's go to the next place for maintenance. After following Enji for maintenance, Scylla was ready to go back to the lounge to lie down, but he had only taken a few steps when he heard Carrie's roar. Scylla, look at what your cat has done. Chapter 90. Carrie looked at the storage cupboard in his room, his face livid with anger. He raised his trembling hand and pointed at the almost empty storage cupboard. He said to Scylla, who had just walked over, and Yudi, who was wearing strawberry-patterned pajamas and plush slippers, "Sleepy, you guys have to be responsible for the evil that your pets have done." Scylla glanced at the storage cupboard. It was really clean. No wonder Carrie was so angry. Yudi yawned and said without the slightest sense of guilt, "I told you to remember to lock the food cupboard. Who can you blame if it's stolen? How was that reasonable?" Carrie was so angry that his eyebrows were almost raised. "I locked it." "What about the door?" The door was not locked. Seeing Carrie's constipated look, he knew that he must have forgotten to lock the door again. Yudi said lazily, "How many times has it been? I can only say that you are stupid and have no sense of worry." You. Carrie wanted to pick up a hammer and smash it. "How many times has that bastard chameleon eaten secretly? How dare you say that? That chameleon of yours is as smart as a ghost. It actually knows how to hide its toenails and uses a decoder." Carrie was annoyed at the thought of this. "And you, Scylla, listen." Carrie pressed the communicator in his hand. It played a recording. This was installed by Carrie on the lock. As soon as the cupboard was unlocked, it would automatically start recording. After a series of rustling sounds, 2 different rhythms of chewing food could be heard. Yudi's miantuan had a specific chewing frequency. Carrie was quite familiar with this. He could even hear the sound of that bastard chameleon sucking food with its tongue. It had to be said that the miantuan was indeed a freak among the chameleons. It had a wide range of diets. It could eat vegetables, eat meat, drink wine, and drink fruit juice. This was not a fucking chameleon, but a demon from somewhere. No wonder when Scylla first set foot on this starship, when Diaz mentioned the miantuan, the first thing he asked was, what did he do wrong? He recognized the sound of the miantuan eating, and the other sound should be that of the huimao. Meow. This satisfied meow after eating and drinking made the veins on Carrie's forehead bulge. Carrie's heart was bleeding. His compressed biscuits, jerky, and fruit pies. Hearing this voice, Scylla's eyes twitched. Meow my ass. You can do bad things, but don't let people know. Are you afraid that people won't know that you're the only cat on the starship? Sigh, that's enough. Scylla patted Carrie's shoulder. When we meet up with the captain, we'll stock up some food. I promise that your cabinet will be filled to the brim. As for that cat, you can treat it as a greeting gift. Maybe when you're in danger, the cat will repay you for saving your life. That kitten that hasn't fully grown yet? Don't judge a cat by its appearance. That little guy is very powerful. Carrie was silent for a while, then waved his hand. Get out of here, you two. I'm going to change the lock. Yudi, tell your Miantuan to hide well. Don't let me catch you. In the past, Carrie used to use fingerprint identification. Later, after the bastard chameleon stole his fingerprint, Carrie reflected on it. It was just a fingerprint. Where couldn't he get it on the starship? The guy that had been with Yudi and Beaver for so long was used to this kind of thing. Therefore, Carrie changed the locks one by one to prevent the gluttonous chameleon. Somewhere on the starship. Hui Mao licked his paws and wiped his face. He stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. He looked at the Miantuan. Are there any food scraps? The Miantuan shook his head. That's good. Hee hee, it's not bad to have a change of taste. Hui Mao was very satisfied. The Miantuan grinned. Finally, he had a companion to eat with him. The Miantuan nestled in Yudi's room. It was a lush small tree that was only half the height of a person. However, it was full of leaves. The Miantuan liked to sleep on it. After eating, he would sleep. This was the instinct of an animal. However, the Miantuan's steps were a little hesitant. After all, he had done something bad again. When he arrived at the door of Yudi's room, he raised his forelimbs and pressed a button. A hole appeared. The Miantuan stuck his tongue inside. After scanning his tongue, a small door opened with a beep. He climbed in. His forelimbs landed on the ground. When he looked up, he saw Yudi waiting for him. Hurry up and get in here. Close the door. I have something to ask you. Yudi's voice sounded calm. The Miantuan moved in slowly. After the small door was closed, he still leaned against the wall. His eyes darted around, but he didn't look at Yudi. You were caught by Carrie again for stealing food today. The Miantuan's body stiffened and he lowered his head. When you open the lock, remember to check if there's anything else installed on the lock. After a pause, Yudi said, You didn't open the lock on Carrie's cabinet, did you? I remember Carrie changed the lock with multidimensional encryption. I haven't taught you how to open that kind of lock. The Miantuan nodded. How did he open it? Yudi took out an electronic drawing board. The Miantuan walked over and started to draw on it with his limbs. It was hard to imagine a dragon could use its limbs so flexibly. Looking at the drawing on the drawing board, Yudi's eyes flashed and he smiled. Get along well with that cat in the future. It'll benefit you greatly. The Miantuan nodded. Alright, get out and find a place to sleep. You're not allowed to sleep in the nest today. Carrie told you to hide well. Don't let him catch you. Yudi put away the drawing board and stopped looking at the Miantuan. He lay on the bed and continued to catch up on his sleep. He didn't sleep well today before he was woken up by Carrie. The Miantuan looked pitifully at his little green nest and crawled out of the room through the little door. I'll have to find a place to sleep again today. Forget it. I'll go find that cat. At least I'll have a companion to share the punishment with when Carrie catches me. Hui Mao didn't fare much better either. He was taught a lesson by Scylla, and he even owed him a favor. However, the guy only felt depressed for a moment before he curled his body into a circle and slept soundly. The sixth team's target this time was Sector Z. It was one of the 3 most dangerous and undeveloped sectors in the League of Stars. There were very few official star maps of Sector Z. Almost only the outermost zone was shown. Sector Z was a dark triangle on the overall star map of the League of Stars. Darkness meant that it was undeveloped, and because it was triangular, it was called the Dark Triangle. Of course, this was only public information. If a hunter regiment had explored it themselves, the star maps recorded would either be sold at a high price or kept for their own use. Normally, they wouldn't make them public unless there was something special. If a hunter regiment could discover a habitable planet, then it would be a matter of both fame and fortune for a hunter regiment. The League of Stars had made relevant policies since a long time ago. If a habitable planet was discovered in an undeveloped area, they would allocate a large amount of bounty to the hunter regiment who discovered it. At the same time, they would also report it on high-contribution magazines. It was enough to increase the hunter regiment's fame, and some would even allow the hunter regiment to name their own planet. The reason the 4 great hunter regiments were so famous was because they appeared so frequently in magazines that they outshone the other hunter regiments. Shotton's choice of Sector Z was also made after careful consideration and a show of hands by the 6 lieutenant commanders. If they wanted to increase their influence now, they had to produce results. Other than the discovery of habitable planets, the places that truly contained great treasures were the undeveloped areas. Danger and opportunity coexisted. Chapter 91. By the time Sillin and the others had arrived at the rendezvous point Shotton had mentioned, the other 5 squads had already returned to their respective squads. After they had merged their starships with the 6th squad's main starship, they reported their hunted goods and traded them to the buyers they had already contacted. However, Sillin didn't need to do anything about it. Right now, he was sitting in his room reading a book. It was a book about space parasites he borrowed from NG. There were a lot of things that couldn't be found on the Federation's major online platforms, and normal electronic publications wouldn't record too much about them. Some of the truly useful things required permission to read. Sillin's current identity as a hunter couldn't read some official documents. Hunters usually kept their belongings to their own people and wouldn't easily make them public. The book in Sillin's hands belonged to Vanguard, and it wasn't announced to the public. This book was more like a notebook. It was something that the person who wrote it down. Although it wasn't the original, at least all the notes were copied exactly the same. Sillin could see the mood of the person who wrote it at the time from the handwriting. The person who wrote this notebook was called Communidin, but NG only said that it was left behind by a deceased senior. He didn't explain too much about Communidin, but Sillin could roughly guess the person's identity from the contents. From some of the things recorded in the notebook, Sillin knew that Communidin was a member of the 3rd B Squadron. He was probably an engineer on a starship like NG, but his position was higher than NG's. This was because Communidin had mentioned the 3rd B Squadron's commander Nada more than once, and it seemed like he had a good relationship with Nada. The problem was that the current commander of the 3rd B Squadron wasn't called Nada, but Falvi. That being said, 47 years was enough for the masses of humanity to welcome a new generation. Judging from the ephemeris recorded in the notebook, this notebook had been around for a while. The last record was 47 years ago, and there were no other records after that. There were a lot of pictures in the notebook, and they were all of the parasites Communidin encountered when he was in the 3rd B Squadron. There were also annotations and explanations at the bottom of the pictures, stating the habits and hobbies of the parasites shown in the pictures. As Sillin was reading, the doorbell rang. It was Carrie, whom he hadn't seen for a long time. Although he was waiting outside, Carrie's face was full of excitement. "What? Did you win the prize? You look so happy." Sillin closed the book and said to Carrie who came in. "Hee, I have something to show you." Carrie took out his laptop and brought up a 3D projection. "Look, new equipment. Do you feel domineering? This time, the captain is really going all out," Carrie said excitedly as he switched images. Just looking at the image alone was enough to shock Sillin. There was a wide variety of weapons in this batch, ranging from cold equipment to firearms. Although he didn't recognize many of the strange weapons, he knew that they were expensive just from the plasma guns and shoulder cannons. Carrie pointed at one of the wrist blades and asked sneakily, "Do you know how much this wrist blade costs?" "What material?" "I don't know, but I asked the lieutenant before, and this is how much it costs." Carrie held up 5 fingers. 50,000. 500,000. Truly shocking. Sillin had always thought that he was a little rich, but now he was dealt a blow. It really is a money-burning job. Seeing Sillin's expression, Carrie said, "You can't be thinking that those lousy guns you used to kill white bears are enough for a 5-year mission, can you? Exploration in the universe is a money-burning job. If your equipment is not good, no matter how many lives you have, it won't be enough. In the last 5-year mission, I remember that when I went to kill a strange creature, it crushed my high-strength alloy knife like it was mud. I almost lost my life." Carrie dragged a chair over and sat down. "Before I became a hunter, I was very naive about everything. Only after I became one did I realize how stupid I was. Luck doesn't come to me all the time, and benefits don't come to me all the time. In the captain's words, we have to be pragmatic. Confidence needs the accumulation of capital. So basically, the trivial missions that we usually do are prepared for the 5-year mission." Sillin agreed with Carrie's words. A few $100 million might seem like a lot, but in reality, if it was really used on high-level missions, it would burn through very quickly. Just like the results published in Glory and Code, they were obtained by stepping on the corpses of countless people and test subjects, and burning through countless amounts of money. Otherwise, how could it be so easy to have such illustrious achievements that would affect the entire League of Stars? Even Ori, the one who created the strange chip, must have sacrificed a lot of people's lives even if he didn't necessarily spend a lot of money on it. Sillin still remembered the failed experimental subjects who were preserved in liquid-like specimens in Ori's laboratory. Looking into Sillin's room, Carrie asked, "Where's that bastard cat of yours?" "He went to patrol the territory." That guy had to patrol this starship every day, clearly dividing it into his own territory. The Miantuan also joined in the fun. However, Sillin did not allow Hui Mao to step into other starships. He was only allowed to move around in the small team's starship. "By the way, Carrie, do you know Komunidin?" "Komunidin?" Carrie frowned and thought for a moment, then shook his head. "Never heard of him." "What about Nada?" "Nada. I think I've heard of him." "Oh, he's the father of Falvi, the captain of Team 3. Nada was the previous captain of Team 3, but more than 40 years ago." At this point, Carrie paused and scratched his head. "Sillin, some things are hard to say." Sillin waved his hand. "It's okay, I'm just curious." This notebook was written by Komunidin, and Komunidin used to be a member of Team 3. However, Brother Enji said that Senior Komunidin had passed away many years ago. The last record in this notebook was from 47 years ago. 47 years ago. That year, many glorious people fell. Sigh, I've only heard a few words. If the captain doesn't talk about these things, it's better for us not to talk about it. You know, the incident that year involved many people. It's too complicated. The 4 major hunter regiments, the military, and even some political figures were involved. Yes, I understand. Although he said this, Sillin was actually very curious about the incident that happened 47 years ago. After all, he had never heard anything about it until now. However, what Sillin thought was one thing, but he could not show it on his face. "Alright, I'm here to talk to you about the new goods. As frontline combatants, we have the right to choose first, but our choices are limited. Think about what you want to choose first, and I'll send you the information. The lieutenant and the others are probably coming back from a meeting soon. When they return, we'll depart for Sector Z. We must do a good job this time." Not long after Carrie left, Diaz returned from a meeting and notified the members of the squad to go over and instruct them on the relevant matters. Then, the staff members returned to their positions. Although they were connected to the A Squadron's large starship and did not need to do much, they still had to pay attention to some details. They had to be prepared to deal with unexpected events at all times. Amidst the music, the giant starship marked with the Vanguard emblem left Sector T and headed towards their destination, Sector Z of the Dark Triangle. Chapter 92. Although Sector Z was called the Dark Triangle, it didn't mean that it was actually a sea of darkness. It was just that it was an undeveloped area, and that was why it was black on the League of Stars star map. Carrie looked at the exterior scene displayed on the screen and muttered, "This really doesn't look like the Dark Triangle." The scenery outside the starship was similar to the other sectors. The stars were bright, but it was known that the creatures in this area were very dangerous, and magnetic anomalies were common. There was a team made up of specialized personnel on the main ship that was responsible for scanning and probing. According to the old rules, they had to probe at least 10 planets every time they arrived at an undeveloped area, or it would be a disgrace to Vanguard. The periphery of Sector Z had been explored before, and some of them were done by Vanguard. However, no matter which hunter regiment it was, they would only explore a certain number of planets each time. They would not explore too many planets at once, and it was fine as long as they could do it. Exploration was not the same as suicide, at least they had to know their limits. After looking at the general star map, Shotten chose a flight route. This route extended slightly towards the center of Sector Z at a certain angle, but not too far. He would proceed step by step. The partial results of the exploration team's analysis would be transmitted to the 6 squadrons on the main ship at the same time. Looking at the data displayed on the screen, Carrie sighed. They had explored 3 planets since they came to Sector Z. One planet's habitability was rank C, and the other 2 were rank D. Habitability was the degree to which a planet was suitable for human habitation. It was usually divided into 4 levels, A, B, C, and D. A planet meant that the planet was very suitable for human habitation. If they discovered a planet like this, the 6th team would become famous, and they would receive a huge fortune. If it was B class, then it was just so. Although the conditions were not very good, they could still make do with it. It should be noted that many planets with rank B habitability were not very suitable for human habitation, but they were suitable for other life forms. Therefore, many large families would buy these planets for special breeding purposes. Rank C meant that the planet was not suitable for human habitation. The environmental conditions there prevented humans from staying in their natural state for long periods of time. Rank D meant that the planet was extremely unsuitable for human habitation. It was not a matter of time before humans could survive in their natural state. If the habitability level was D, they only needed to send out probes to search, take samples, and record various parameters, coordinates, and so on. However, these were the work of the technical staff and had nothing to do with Carrie. However, if it was a grade C planet, then it would not just be a matter of the probes. They would also need to send a small team to search the planet, retrieve living creatures, and list out the evolution of the creatures on the planet. When Carrie heard that one of them was a C-grade planet, he stood up and prepared to pick up his weapon. However, Shotten arranged for another team to go down. Although they didn't find much, and the evolution level of the creatures on the planet was relatively low, there wasn't even a single high-grade plant. However, Carrie felt that it was too idle, and it was fine to go out for a walk. Bored, he glanced at the Miantuan that was rolling around with Huimao not far away. Carrie chuckled and grabbed the Miantuan's tail before it could sense the danger and escape. He rolled it into a ball. Carrie threw the Miantuan like a pinball against the wall. He caught it after it bounced back, threw it again, and caught it again. Seeing this, Huimao's pair of cat eyes widened, and its pupils dilated. Its head swayed along the Miantuan's trajectory, and before the Miantuan hit the wall, it jumped up with a whoosh. Smack! Not bad. Other than eating and sleeping, it seems that you still have some uses. As he spoke, Carrie threw the Miantuan that had been smacked back to another angle, and it was smacked back again. He changed the angle again, and it was smacked back again, and again, and again. The man and the cat were having a lot of fun playing there. All teams, attention. A grade B planet has been discovered. All teams, get ready. Smack! The Miantuan was smacked against the wall. Carrie and Hui Mao were attracted by the news, and no one smacked it again. Everyone gathered in front of the screen closest to them, which displayed the results sent by the detection and analysis team. Low atmospheric pressure and oxygen partial pressure, strong radiation. Sigh, it's actually not that bad. It's fine even without the protective suit. Carrie said excitedly as he stared at the screen. A grade B planet was not that easy to discover. A grade C planet was enough to make Carrie excited for a long time, let alone a grade B planet. Most of the time, a small team would be enough for a grade C planet, but for a grade B planet, everyone would basically be sent out. Through the pictures, analysis data, and various parameters sent back by the detector, everyone started to make preparations. Each of the 6 teams had to send out a team in advance. When Tang Qiuqiu saw that Silin, Xiao Shang, Ba Dao, and Carrie were all in the advanced team, she wanted to go with them, but Diaz rejected her and asked her to go with the second team. A grade B planet meant that there were a lot of advanced creatures. No matter what level they evolved to, whether they were similar to humans, and no matter what level their civilization had developed to, they could not be underestimated. Even plants could eat humans sometimes. After all, Tang Qiuqiu was still young. In terms of adventure experience, she definitely could not compare to the others. Therefore, for the sake of safety, Diaz rejected Tang Qiuqiu's proposal to join the advanced team. Seeing that Carrie and the others had left, the Miantuan slowly crawled to Yudi's feet with a heavily injured look. It hugged Yudi's trouser leg, looking very aggrieved. It wanted to complain that it had been mistreated. Yudi calmly took a sip of tea. Today, we can go and loot Carrie's cabinet. The previously dispirited Miantuan trembled when it heard that. It quickly perked up as if it had been injected with chicken blood. It turned around and ran toward Carrie's room. It crawled very quickly and did not seem to be injured at all. On the other side, Hui Mao naturally followed Silin and the others into the aircraft. Seeing that, Carrie nudged Hui Mao with the barrel of his gun. "What are you going to do?" Hui Mao said with anticipation, "I'm going to look for food, of course." Carrie choked and said to Silin, "Silin, aren't you afraid that something will happen to this little one?" Silin glanced at Hui Mao, who was squatting by his feet and shaking its head rhythmically. "It might not be worse than you." "Yes, I'm definitely not worse than you," Hui Mao said. "Right my ass. Don't think that I won't know the contempt in your words just because you changed the order of your words." Carrie knocked Hui Mao's head with the barrel of his gun. "I heard that cats and tigers share the same ancestor. We're about to go to war. Let's give a loud and domineering roar to boost the morale." Originally, Carrie wanted to give this gluttonous and sleepy cat a blow, but he did not expect Hui Mao to really open its mouth. "Be careful, we're on the aircraft," Silin reminded him. Hui Mao's mouth was wide open. It paused for a moment and adjusted itself. "Take a deep breath. Roar." The communication devices of the 6 spacecrafts that were part of the vanguard of the 6 squads were switched on, and the main ship was also connected. Therefore, the sudden roar that sounded like a prehistoric behemoth directly shocked everyone. The aircraft that Silin and the others were on also made an S-shaped trajectory. The pilot of the aircraft was so shocked that he almost jumped up. Roar of a beast. Where did the beast come from? Was it a purposely played sound effect? "Diaz, what's going on?" On the main ship, Shotten shouted into the communication device. "Ahem, this is a roar made by one of our members to boost morale." Diaz wiped his sweat. He looked at Carrie, who was a little dazed, and Hui Mao, who was licking its paws as if nothing had happened after the roar. He sighed in his heart. "No wonder it's our team's cat." The 6 aircraft flew out of the starship and headed toward the green planet in front of them from 6 different directions. After scanning the terrain and confirming the landing point, they landed. The defense system was activated, and the Sentinels were released. The Sentinels were distributed around the aircraft in a regular pattern. After confirming that it was safe, the cabin door opened. The first to come out was not Diaz, the deputy captain, but Hui Mao. Hui Mao couldn't wait to jump out. Its nose twitched, and it took a deep breath. It let out a long sigh. The smell of food. Then it ran away. Don't worry about it. Let's do our job, Silen said. Diaz nodded. Previously, when they were on the starship, they had already distributed the work, so there was no need to give more instructions now. Let's go. Everyone was wearing protective clothing and masks. In addition to blocking radiation, resisting pressure, and maintaining a constant body temperature, the protective clothing was mainly used to prevent contact with poisonous plants. Unknown planets and unknown species, so it was best to be careful. The protective clothing was equipped with weapons. Everyone's equipment was different, so they chose their equipment according to what they were familiar with. There was a scanner attached to the mask, and it had settings such as zoom, filtering, and locking. It provided a variety of vision while also locking on to the target. This kind of equipment did indeed cost a lot of money. It also proved what Carrie said, this was a job that burned money. Chapter 93. Although the detectors and the 6 squads that were scattered around did not find anything related to the mechanical civilization, everyone was still fully armed. Sometimes, native animals and plants were more difficult to deal with than machines. Silen's party was led by Diaz as they walked through the jungle. The reason why this planet looked green was because there were many jungles. The trees were many and dense, and many species had never been seen before. The collection and analysis of the plant species was done by the detectors, and Silen's party would collect the information of the animals according to the situation. One had to know that even if it was just information, as long as the species was special and had never been discovered by humans, information about them would be worth a lot of money. The results of the sensors would be displayed on the mask, and the humidity, temperature, and pressure of the surrounding air would also be displayed. There were birds flying over the forest, and they were very fast. Through the instantaneous capture and analysis of the images, they could tell that these birds were similar to eagles, but they were slightly different. Moreover, their cries were sometimes high and sometimes low, sometimes sharp and sometimes low, and sometimes long and short. Stepping on the thick leaves on the ground, the group walked carefully. Silen loosened the mask and took a breath of the surrounding air, distinguishing the mixed smell in the air. The main tree species in the forest was a large tree that had never been seen before. Diaz chopped down a large tree that was growing relatively well. The tree was very hard, and it would be very suitable for some manufacturing. The horizontal cut of the trunk showed its growth rings. They were very dense, and there was not much space between each ring. Diaz sent the image of this cross-section of the tree rings to the spaceship, and the people on the spaceship sent the information to the starship outside the planet. There would be specialized personnel to collect and analyze the information. "Yo, the flowers on that tree are quite beautiful," someone said. There was a tree not far away. It was not too tall, but it was very thick. The center was about 5 meters tall, and the diameter of the trunk was about 1 meter. There were many branches, distributed on both sides like open wings. The leaves were very thick, and there were some dark brown dots on the trunk, arranged vertically on the trunk. What was strange was that there were some vine-like things on the trunk. One end of the vine was connected to the trunk, and the other end was filled with beautiful red and white flowers. The red and white petals seemed to be arranged by a thin layer of scales. The scattered light from the leaves above shone on the flower and was reflected by the scales. It was like the bright starlight in the universe. Just looking at it gave people the urge to reach out and pick it up. Silen sniffed the air. There was a slight licky smell in the air, like a temptation. If it was an ordinary person without a mask, they would definitely not be able to resist this temptation and walk forward. Although the flowers were beautiful, no one walked up to them. Although the flowers gave people a breathtaking feeling at first glance, based on experience, the more beautiful the flowers were, the more murderous they were. Carrie chopped off another section of the tree that Diaz had cut down and threw it at the tree. Almost at the moment when this section of the trunk touched a flower, the surrounding branches that spread out like wings closed at lightning speed, imprisoning the prey. At the same time, with a whooshing sound, Scylla and the others saw a row of sharp thorns piercing through the trunk. Those sharp thorns were the dark brown dots that they saw on the trunk earlier. And from this series of reactions, it could be seen that this arrangement was simply a natural trap. The group of people shivered. The trunk was very hard, but those sharp thorns easily pierced through it like tofu. It could be seen that the hardness was extraordinary. Dias waved his hand, and the group continued to walk forward. The more they walked, the stranger they felt. Other than a small number of lethal plants, this forest was actually considered safe, and there were not many poisonous plants. However, other than some small insects, it was too quiet. This kind of silence was not in terms of sound. After all, there was the occasional sound of insects flapping their wings and birds flying in the sky from time to time, but their figures were blocked by the increasingly dense branches. This kind of silence meant that after walking in this forest for so long, they did not see a slightly larger animal. Rabbits, monkeys, wild boars, mice, and whatnot. Based on past experience, the group also looked for some places that might have animal caves, but still did not find any. There were no animals in such a good environment. That was impossible. Some of the images taken by the probes in space around the planet had seen a few large and ferocious animals. It could be said that although this planet did not develop a mechanical civilization, the species evolution had also evolved to a relatively high level. Dias was puzzled, and he had an inexplicable sense of crisis. He had always trusted his intuition, and his intuition told him that this situation was very bad. They were now deep in the forest, and the deeper they went, the more they felt that there was a big mouth waiting for them. While the group was thinking, the sensors sounded an alarm. Through the scanning area displayed on the masks, the group discovered that some things were coming towards them. There were more than 30 of them, which was 3 times the number of people they had, and they were moving very fast. Without needing Dias to say anything, the group formed a formation, and the weapons in their hands were ready. As they got closer, even without the face scanner, they could hear the sound of those things running and the low growls they made. Bang 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 bang. Before those things completely came into sight, the group opened fire. If they waited until they really saw them before firing, it would be too late. Everyone was an experienced hunter. Even new members like Scylla, Ba Dao, and Xiao Shang had a lot of experience, so they did not panic at all in this situation. Their hands holding the guns were steady, and their aim was good. With the positioning signal on the masks, although it was not 100%, it was definitely 99% accurate. The display of the heat signal also allowed them to seize the opportunity to shoot those things when they were not blocked by thick trees. After so many years of experience, they tried to minimize the wastage of ammunition. However, this time, they had no choice. After shooting those things, they didn't die. Although there was a moment of pause, they were still full of momentum. It seemed like they wouldn't give up until their last breath. Dias calculated that it would take about 5 bullets to kill one of them. He was sure that he had hit the heads of those things every time, but they did not die. They would only stop after the 4th or 5th bullet. Perhaps they were dead, but Dias was not sure. Based on the speed of those things, the gap of 4 or 5 bullets was enough for them to get closer. Moreover, there were only 12 people on their side. Not everyone could kill 3 of those things before they reached them. Scylla had already killed 2 of them. His firing rate was very fast, so fast that the others suspected that he was wasting ammunition. In fact, according to Scylla's heat signal, as long as those things were not blocked by trees, even if it was only for a moment, Scylla would shoot them. He even calculated the speed of the bullets and the running speed of the things, so it was almost accurate. Moreover, Scylla had locked onto 3 of them at the same time. When the others killed one, he was already on the 3rd. Finally, the first one jumped out of the bushes. Scylla and Xiao Shang shot it almost at the same time. Probably because it had been shot before, it was shot twice more before it fell to the ground. Diaz did not have the time to take a closer look at these things. With just a quick glance, he knew why these guys were so resistant. Chapter 94. That thing looked very strange. Its head was simply too small compared to its entire body, and a thick layer of hardened keratin almost covered its entire head. At the back of its head, the keratin layer and bony plates extended backward, covering 1/3 of its torso. It was spread out at a certain angle, so that it could easily block all the attacks from the front. The parts that were not covered by the hardened keratin layer looked extremely thick. Although the 2/3 of its torso did not have thick keratin armor, there were many protruding thorns, making it look even more ferocious. Their legs were thick and short, and the soles of their feet were shaped like hooves. Overall, they looked very cumbersome, but no one would have thought that such a seemingly cumbersome fellow could run so fast. This thing was very well armed. Some people had once said that small animals had low intelligence. In order to survive, they would evolve their bodies into a strict defensive state, making up for their lack of intelligence with the defense of their bodies. Scylla did not know if these things had high intelligence, but even if they were not, they were definitely not idiots. When they attacked, they aimed their heads at the enemy and attacked in a straight line. They tried not to expose the parts of their torso that were not covered by the hardened keratin layer. Although it was only a short glance, everyone had their thoughts. After all, they were veterans, so there was no need to say much. They adjusted their angles and continued to shoot. This time, the focus was on their legs. If they were accurate, one bullet would be able to make them lose their ability to move. In fact, it was not a bad idea to shoot their limbs, but the bushes and some dense grass in the forest covered their thick and short limbs very well. Even the heat sensor might not be able to accurately sense them all the time. Fortunately, there were only about 30 of them. If there were more, they would have to fight in close combat. When they finally got rid of these guys, everyone let out a temporary sigh of relief. However, they did not dare to relax too much. Temporary peace did not mean temporary safety. A few people walked over and shot the ones that were still breathing. Diaz walked towards the closest one. This one was the closest to them, so it was also the one that suffered the most. Looking at the thick keratin covering that thing's head, Diaz fired a shot. Seeing the effect of this shot, everyone was speechless. Based on the gun in his hand, a single shot was enough to leave a huge hole in the chest of those polar bears, but when it hit this thing, it only took off a piece of its skin. If he shot the same spot a second time, he would be able to penetrate the skin, but he didn't know how deep it would go and how much damage it would cause. After all, when it was alive and in a state of attack, the tension of its muscles was different. Perhaps it had some life-saving skills. If there's another wave of these things, we might have to use armor-piercing bullets, someone sighed. Micro-armor-piercing bullets were not used to deal with armored vehicles or some armed aircraft. Instead, they were specifically used to deal with creatures covered in armor, including humans and some other creatures. However, everyone had a limited number of armor-piercing bullets, so they hadn't used them before. I really didn't think that there would be such well-armed creatures on this planet. That hardened stratum corneum and bony plates are way too hard. If these things were as dense as rats. Carrie didn't finish his sentence, but everyone shuddered at the thought. How terrifying. As Carrie spoke, the detector sounded an alarm again. This time, it sounded very urgent. This alarm meant that a foreign life form was approaching. It was the same as the previous alarm, but the previous alarm didn't sound this urgent. What's going on? Someone said. Everyone entered a state of high alert. But not long after, black bugs the size of a fist burrowed out of the ground. These bugs crawled out of the places where the dead creatures were lying. The black bugs burrowed into the wounds of the horny creatures. Not long after, a large number of black bugs wrapped around the creatures, and then the pile of creatures shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. When these bugs finished eating and burrowed back into the ground, all that was left was a layer of stratum corneum and bone. These were the forest's cleaners. As long as any animal died, they would burrow out of the ground and eat the dead animal. Then, they would return to the ground and hibernate, waiting for the next feast. Carrie let out a long sigh of relief. That scared me. As soon as he said that, the alarm sounded again. This time, it wasn't urgent, but that didn't mean it would be easy. Fuck. There's no end to it. Carrie said angrily. Scylla frowned. He had just heard the sound of a bird. Although it wasn't loud, probably from a distance, and it was short, it was definitely the kind of bird he had seen before. It's a snake. Damn, these snakes can change color. Through the scanning, the mask revealed the true appearance of the newcomers. It was difficult to accurately spot these snakes with the naked eye. Snakes were temperature-changing creatures, different from the heat signals released by the horny creatures. But the scanning device still displayed them perfectly on the mask, so everyone could know the specific location of these snakes. Fuck, why are there so many snakes? I didn't see a single one before. Why did so many suddenly appear? That's right, why? Everyone was puzzled. But while they were puzzled, they still had to deal with it. Since it was just snakes, there was no need to retreat. Don't use the flamethrower. Use ultra-low temperature condensation, Diaz said. Got it. Everyone took out a tube-shaped object. When the snakes came within 15 meters of them, they pressed the button on the tube, and white mist sprayed out. When the snakes came into contact with the white mist, they instantly hardened and froze. If the snakes behind wanted to come over, they could only go around the frozen snakes in front. Because even if they hadn't come into contact with the frozen snakes, the previously active snakes couldn't take it anymore. The temperature was too low. With the ultra-low temperature condensation, it didn't take much effort for the group to freeze the snakes. After the snakes were frozen, they smashed them with telescopic sticks. Looking at the white chunks that were smashed on the ground, Diaz waved his hand and continued forward. But after a few steps, the alarm sounded again. One wave had just subsided, and another wave had risen. It was the horny creatures from before. But this time, there were more of them, no less than 100. Carrie looked at the miniature submachine gun he was carrying inside. The bullets of the submachine gun were really useless against these creatures. It was better to change to armor-piercing bullets. Retreat, Diaz said immediately. This kind of environment was too disadvantageous for them. At the same time, Diaz also sent out a distress signal, asking for help. He also sent some information about these horny creatures. Outside the planet, on the starship, Schotten looked at the situation of the 6 teams on the screen. Of the 6 teams, 3 had sent out distress signals. Schotten estimated that the remaining 3 teams wouldn't have it easy either. It was only a matter of time before they called for help. Second team, get ready. After giving a few instructions to the people beside him, Schotten took his equipment and went to support the second team. Chapter 95. In the forest, Diaz opened the subspace container in his hand and took out the ammo inside for everyone to replenish. Logically speaking, subspace containers on planets with a habitability rating of A and below would be unstable. Therefore, most people would only use subspace containers on habitable planets. For planets with a habitability rating of B and below, opening a subspace container would involve different degrees of risk. Even so, Diaz still opened it. If they did not replenish their ammo, it would be difficult for them to have time to replenish their ammo once they started fighting. Fortunately, the activation went smoothly. Although there were some effects and it was not very stable, they were able to take out the items. Vice Captain, it's not just one side that has those things. Xiao Shang exclaimed. The scanner showed a few more dots. After a second scan and cross-analysis of the parameters, they confirmed that these were indeed the creatures with keratin on their heads. They had formed a fan shape and surrounded Diaz and the others. They were either surrounding them or forcing them to the back. They're forcing us back, Xiao Shang said. Yes, if they were only surrounding them, why were they only forming a fan shape? If they were forcing them back, then what would be waiting for them? Although they did not know, it would definitely be more dangerous and disadvantageous to them. They could not retreat. They were in a dangerous situation now. If they retreated, they might be in a situation where they would most likely die. It seemed that these guys were quite intelligent, far higher than they had imagined. After replenishing their ammo, if their aim was good, they could finish them all off with micro-armor-piercing bullets. But this time, these guys seemed to be chasing after their lives. They were even faster than the previous ones. Bang! The bullets struck the hard surface of the horny creatures' heads and drilled through them, entering their heads. Killing one with one shot was indeed a lot easier. However, there were too many of them, and the distance between the two sides was still shrinking. Even though there were only 12 of them, they still had a certain level of confidence in facing those guys with no less than 300. At least the situation was not too bad. Just as they had this thought, the alarm sounded. This time, what the scanning system showed made their hearts sink. Behind these horny creatures, another group of unknown creatures came. They were very fast and did not move in a straight line. The most special thing was that although the unknown creatures behind them were not running in a straight line and were dodging, they were still running toward them in a fan shape. Not long after, everyone saw the creatures running from behind through the telescopic system. They were larger than the horny creatures. Excluding the spikes on their backs, these horny creatures were about a meter tall, while the creatures behind them were more than twice the size of the horny creatures. If these horny creatures were partially armed, then the ones that came later were fully armed. Damn it, these guys are wearing armor again. Moreover, the armor was a lot more difficult to deal with than those guys who only had their heads and torsos equipped. Its body was covered with a hard, red, and black substance that looked like a crystal. From its appearance, it looked a little like a leopard. Carrie took out another type of bullet. This type of bullet looked similar to the armor-piercing bullet, but the color of the bullet was different. Each bullet had a special symbol on it. Bang! The bullet hit one of the big guys, penetrated the thick hard surface, and went inside before exploding. Blood spurted out of the creature's mouth. A lot of the hard, red and black substance on its body was lifted up due to the internal shock, but its body did not seem to have been blown into pieces. Of course, even though it looked fine, its internal organs were blown up. It moved around for a while before it stopped moving. When the others of its kind saw this, they sped up again and ran with more skill, agility, and leaping ability. It was very difficult to lock onto them and shoot them. The two shots that Carrie fired later did not hit their targets but hit the tree trunks instead. The resulting explosion did not affect those creatures much. As long as they missed, even if the explosion happened right next to them, it would not hurt them much. The hard protection on their bodies allowed them to avoid the damage of such an explosion. Due to the red and black monsters coming from behind, the horny creatures running at the front became even more desperate. The horny creatures at the front were the ones who died, and they were also the ones who attracted most of the firepower. There were more than 20 monsters at the back, and this was only what they could see. Diaz did not know if there were more hiding outside their scanning range. Perhaps there were some lying in ambush at the back. Up until now, Carrie was the only one who had killed one first. They were having a hard time fighting two of the creatures at the same time. The two sides were getting closer and closer. Retreat first. Stall for time. The captain and the others will come to support us. Diaz roared. He had no other choice now. If they did not fight while retreating to find suitable cover, it would be very difficult to deal with them once they got close. The monsters behind them could probably kill them with a single swipe of their claws. Climb up a tree. Impossible. They would be dead meat if they did that. No matter how thick a tree was, it would not be able to withstand the claws of these things. Moreover, based on the movements of those creatures, they could also climb up trees. Perhaps they were much more agile in trees than they were. Hoverboards. Although they brought them, they did not dare to use them. If they wanted to fly, they could only fly above the forest. Judging from the jumping speed of those things, they could reach a certain height as long as they borrowed the strength of the tree trunk. Meanwhile, many birds had gathered in the sky above the forest at some point. They could only see their shadows flashing by through the gaps between the leaves. However, everyone knew that as soon as they went up, they would become the target of a multitude of attacks. In the air, humans were not as agile as those big birds, so they would only die even faster. Although they knew that there would be more difficult situations ahead, they had no other choice. Now that they had been forced to this point, they could only take one step at a time and wait for reinforcements from the back. Boom! Someone used a shoulder cannon. Although shoulder cannons were more destructive and definitely more lethal than bullets, they were not very effective against those big guys. The reason was because of the terrain and environment here. This was a forest, and there were thick tree trunks everywhere. Those big guys had very sensitive senses and dodged very quickly, so it was very difficult to really lock onto them. The energy bullets that hit the tree trunks would at most cause some damage to the horny creatures in front of them, but they would not cause much actual damage to the big guys. At most, they would peel off some of their hard skin. However, if they used the shoulder cannon, they would be able to wipe out some of the horny creatures in front of them first, which would reduce their burden by quite a bit. They had already eliminated 3/4 of the horny creatures in front of them, and they had yet to deal with the monsters at the back. The 12 of them alone would not be able to handle them. One of the big guys running at the back ran into one of the plants with red and white flowers when it was dodging bullets, and it directly used its 2 claws to tear the plant in half. This made everyone realize just how difficult it would be to fight these guys in close combat. Even a rank A genotype would not dare to fight them head-on without a weapon, not to mention that the other party had the advantage in numbers. Ba Dao's extra 2 pairs of hands came into play. Although his accuracy might not be as good as Silen's, it was still an extra helping hand. Silen's rapid fire had killed most of the horny-skinned beasts on his side, so the others should be able to deal with the remaining horny-skinned beasts. After reloading, Silen aimed his gun at the big guys behind the horny creatures. They were very alert, especially when they saw Carrie kill one of them with a single shot. They became even more vigilant, and they were very sensitive to being locked onto. Before Carrie could fire, they had already dodged to the side. Bang! A hole was blasted open on the head of one of the big guys, and the dark red hard substance on its skin splattered everywhere. Due to inertia, it rolled on the ground twice before it stopped moving. It did not even sense that it had been locked onto, and it was suddenly shot while it was running. Bang! 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 Another 3 shots were fired in quick succession, and 3 more big guys were shot and fell to the ground. After Silen killed 7 of them, the remaining horny creatures and the big guys covered in hard substance caught up to them. Clang! Sparks flew when the wrist blades that popped out cut into the skin of these big guys, which showed just how hard their skin was. Although they managed to cut in a little, the wounds were too shallow. Unless they were all cut in the same spot, they would not be able to do much damage even if they were torn apart. Extremely low temperature condensation and flames were not very effective against them, and their surface defense was too good. Fortunately, Silen had taken care of 7 of them, and together with the one that Carrie had taken care of first, there were still 15 left. The horny-skinned beasts did not stop there. Instead, they continued to run, so the group only had to face these 15 big guys. Although they were wearing protective suits, the group's dodging speed was still very fast, and they were looking for points of attack as they dodged. Perhaps they knew that Silen posed the greatest threat to them, so 3 of them attacked Silen. Using the recoil from the wrist blades hitting their bodies, Silen jumped up and fired a shot into the mouth of one of the big guys that was pouncing at him. The impact from the bullet's explosion lifted countless small pieces off its hard surface, and dark red blood and internal organ fragments also sprayed out of its mouth. After that shot, Silen did not stop. He dodged the one that was coming at him from behind, stepped on the tree trunk with his foot, twisted his body, and quickly jumped up to dodge. Then, he fired another shot at the one that was pouncing at him from the side. This series of attacks was extremely fast. Even Diaz would have a hard time doing this while wearing protective suits. The big guy that was pouncing at him had already leaped off the ground, so it could not dodge instantly and was shot directly. He put away his wrist blades, and at the same time, 3 small hooks popped out and hooked onto the thick tree trunk next to him. He turned around along the trunk and fired another shot at the one that was about to make a move. Diaz, who was fighting a big guy, roared in his heart, "I haven't even taken care of one, and that kid has already taken care of 3. After taking care of 3, Silen found an opening and helped Xiao Shang take care of 1. That big guy's mistake was that it should not have sent Xiao Shang flying at that moment, giving Silen the opportunity to take care of it. If the 2 of them were too close, it would not have been easy to shoot. "Silen, go help Carrie. There are 2 attacking him," Xiao Shang roared. They thought that Carrie was the first to kill 1, so the big guys classified Carrie and Silen as dangerous. The most threatening one was Silen, so they sent out 3 of them, followed by Carrie, so 2 of them went to deal with Carrie, and the remaining one was a one-on-one. Carrie? That guy was pushed too hard by 2 of them, so he should have retreated a little further than everyone else, but he should not have retreated beyond the range of the scanner, right? In terms of flexibility, Carrie was not as good as Silen, so the only thing he could do was to prevent the 2 from attacking him from the front and back. However, this guy could not have retreated so far that he could not even see his shadow, right? Chapter 96. The further he went, the denser the grass became. From the knee-high grass, Silen followed the traces left behind by the creature. It didn't take long for him to see a dead alien beast covered in black and red scales. Judging from the signs, this big guy was indeed killed by a bullet that exploded from the inside after it was shot. Black bugs crawled out of the ground and were eating. The strange thing was, not far from where the big guy died, the traces on the grass changed. They looked like they were dragged. There were many broken vines in the surroundings. Although these vines weren't thick, they were very tough. The broken parts of the vines weren't smooth, and it looked like they were forcefully broken. After tracking for a while, Silen saw another big fellow. It had also been shot and died from an internal explosion. From this point onwards, there were clear signs of struggle in the dragging traces. Pushing aside the grass, Silen discovered 3 deep scratches on the ground. They were probably left behind by Carrie's claws when he was being dragged by the vines. Just a few steps later, Silen found a severed vine in the bushes. The cut was very smooth, so it should be Carrie who cut it with a knife. Further ahead was a steep slope. Below the slope was a green river. The river wasn't wide, but the current was very fast. Silen found Carrie's gun on the slope. Carrie must have rolled down the slope and fell into the river. The protective suit was waterproof, but after all this, Carrie's protective suit must have been seriously damaged. The positioning device on his body didn't respond either. Silen turned on the communicator to leave a message for Diaz, but he found that the communicator was buzzing and the signal was in chaos. What's going on? Forget it, let's not worry about it for now. Silen had installed a message button at the slope. If Diaz and the others had finished their business on the other side and followed the trail here, they would definitely discover this button. Silen exhaled and looked down the river, hoping that Carrie was still safe. How is Carrie now? Carrie's current situation was very bad, very bad. When he was chased by the 2 big guys, his feet were tied up by the vines under the grass. But thanks to these vines, the speed at which his feet were tied up was very fast. Carrie didn't need to pay attention to his feet. He could focus on the 2 big guys behind him. The 2 big guys were obviously also troubled by the vines, which gave Carrie an opportunity to take advantage of. Otherwise, with the speed of those 2 beasts, they wouldn't have been destroyed so easily. However, success was due to vines, and also due to vines. Carrie's protective suit was torn by a big guy, but he wasn't scratched. When the vines wrapped around Carrie, the capillaries on the vines pierced through Carrie's skin, which was not protected by the protective suit. The neurotoxin penetrated deep into Carrie's body, so when Carrie cut the vines, his consciousness was already blurred and he was in a trance. After staggering a few steps, he rolled down the steep slope and fell into the river. Before falling, Carrie pressed the life button with difficulty, and a lifebuoy surrounded him. He didn't know how far he was washed away, but Carrie's A-rank genes played an advantage, and the trance caused by the neurotoxin in his body began to lessen. If a person below C-rank suffered from this toxin, they probably wouldn't last long before dying. After recovering some consciousness and physical strength, Carrie pressed a device on his arm, and a drill with a rope flew out. The drill shot into the stone wall next to the river and drilled into it. Then the rope retracted and pulled Carrie to the shore. After climbing ashore and retrieving the drill in the stone wall, Carrie looked above the stone wall. Above it was the forest, similar to the steep slope that he fell down. However, Carrie planned to stay here for the time being. What if he went up and encountered those big guys again? He didn't know if the communicator was broken or there was no signal, but there was no response. Taking a breath, Carrie looked at the dark green river. The river was a bit strange. The speed of the river had decreased a lot, and it was almost flat. Carrie saw a bunch of egg-sized emerald green objects floating towards him from the river. Although his vision wasn't as sharp as usual due to the neurotoxin's influence, Carrie was sure that there were no such things just now. The emerald green objects on the river surface increased, and they gathered toward Carrie. Fuck. No matter how confused Carrie was, he knew that these things were not good. He flicked the drill hook again and threw it toward the steep slope above the stone wall. After pulling it up the slope, the claw hook popped out from his wrist, and he climbed up the slope bit by bit. What if he accidentally fell down again? After climbing up the slope, Carrie lay on the ground beside a large rock. He felt like a puddle of paste, and he had no strength left. Although the symptoms of the neurotoxin had lessened, and his consciousness was much clearer, he still felt weak all over. He didn't know where the firearms on him were. If he encountered those hard black and red alien beasts again, only death would await him. In his current state, it was difficult to even cut a fruit with his wrist knife. As Carrie was thinking, he heard a familiar low growl. It was the kind of growl that was slow and rhythmic like breathing. Auditory hallucination? He listened attentively and raised his head. What a tragedy! Carrie wailed in his heart. He had just thought of these guys, and they had appeared. 1, 2, 3, 6. What happened to Diaz and the rest? Why were there 6 of them here? If it was possible, Carrie wanted to grab the cannon and fight it out with these guys. He would die without regrets. However, the current situation made him feel very unwilling. The 6 black and red alien beasts were not in a hurry to pounce on Carrie. Instead, they slowly walked towards him. Their gazes made Carrie feel like he was a stupid monkey for others to watch. Gazes? Carrie looked carefully. Indeed, the gazes in their eyes were not like those of ordinary animals, but more like the eyes of humans. That was called. Yes, spirituality. That was what Yudi said. Seeing the 6 big guys slowly approaching, Carrie slowly propped up his upper body, leaned his back against the rock, and flicked out his wrist knife. In fact, his entire arm, which was connected to the wrist knife, was trembling. The neurotoxin had not been completely cleared, and his muscles were still twitching. However, there was still a grenade in the bag at his waist. In such a situation where death was certain, some people would choose to commit suicide, but not Carrie. He would fight to the end, even if he had to die together with his enemies. This was his belief, the belief he had chosen when he walked the path of a hunter. Seeing Carrie flick out his wrist knife, the 6 big guys revealed looks of disdain. Come on, you ugly guys. When they were within 10 meters of him, Carrie's other hand without the wrist knife turned to the grenade, ready to press the button. Roar, a long roar, like the roar of an ancient giant beast, the sound wave almost burst Carrie's eardrums. However, hearing this sound, Carrie almost cried. A gray figure flashed. Bang! Out of the 6 exotic beasts, 1 was sent flying, 1 was stepped on, and the other 4 were forced 20 meters away by the sound waves coming straight at them. The streamlined body glowed with a metallic luster, with a different kind of elegance, looking down at the 4 black and red alien beasts 20 meters away. Chapter 97. Carrie stared blankly at the gray fellow in front of him that was even bigger than the red and black exotic beasts. From its appearance, it looked a little like a cheetah and a little like a lion. Its skin had a metallic luster, but it felt very soft, like liquid metal. Moreover, it didn't look as ferocious as the red and black exotic beasts. However, why did that sound so much like that gluttonous Huimao? In the roar just now, the high-frequency sound waves were only directed at the red and black exotic beasts and not in Carrie's direction. Otherwise, based on Carrie's current state, he would probably die on the ground with blood flowing out of his orifices. This big fellow with a metallic luster knocked a red and black exotic beast into the air and even stepped on another one under its claws. The hard surface of the exotic beast that was stepped on was cracked, and many red and black fine pieces were peeled off to the side. It clearly didn't look as ferocious as the red and black exotic beasts, and its body was only slightly bigger. However, its domineering aura was displayed to the fullest. Under its elegant appearance, it couldn't hide its arrogance and recklessness. It exerted force under its claws. Crack, crack, crack. A cracking sound came from the red and black exotic beast under its claws. Black-red blood flowed continuously from its mouth, and its sharp white teeth were dyed red with blood. Roar, a miserable howl resounded through the forest. Even Carrie felt a chill run down his spine when he heard the voice. The birds circling in the air hurriedly cried a few times and flew away in a hurry. The 4 red and black exotic beasts bared their teeth and let out a low roar. The big metal fellow looked at the red and black exotic beast that could no longer move under its claws. With a "chee" sound, it extended its side-like claws. Carrie felt that the big metal fellow laughed disdainfully when it looked at the 4 red and black exotic beasts in front of it. Then, its claws swept across the red and black exotic beast that had lost its ability to move on the ground. Carrie was dumbfounded as he watched the red and black exotic beast that even his wrist blade couldn't finish off in one go be cut into pieces. It really was like cutting a fruit, and there wasn't a single trace of blood on its claws. After it was done, it even looked at the 4 red and black exotic beasts in a threatening manner. It didn't roar or bare its teeth. With just a simple glance, the 4 red and black exotic beasts turned around and ran away. Yo, what a mess. After absorbing the white ball, Huimao's metal form had become even more perfect. Without that kind of mechanical roughness, it looked smoother. Listening to the familiar voice, Carrie was still a little unsure. Who? Snore. It's Hubie Lu. Huimao's body slowly shrunk, returning to its original cat form. However, even this small cat form could not conceal its arrogance. It was clearly much lower than Carrie's, but Carrie felt that this fellow was still looking down on him. Carrie smiled and accidentally choked. He coughed twice and then looked at Huimao, who was licking his claws and wiping his face. Wheeze, come and give me a hug. Hold my ass. I could have eaten all 4 of them, but because of you, I had no choice but to spare them, Huimao said unhappily. Sillin told it, focus on Carrie's comfort. Don't just think about eating. Ah. Then I'm really sorry. I dragged you down. Even so, Carrie didn't feel very apologetic. He was very grateful to Huimao for saving him at a critical moment. At the same time, Carrie also understood what Sillin meant when he said, when in danger, that cat will show mercy and save your life. Why don't I treat you to a feast next time when I have time? At least you know what's good for you. Huimao's tone showed that he was giving him face. By the way, how did you find me? Carrie asked. Sillin sent a sonic signal flare. I only found out that something happened to you when I came over. I was wondering how something could happen to Sillin so easily with his ability. Where's Sillin? I'll be there soon. After Silen handed the task of finding Carrie to Huimao, he returned to check on Dias's situation. If he was looking for Carrie, Huimao would have an advantage. Moreover, Silen believed in Huimao's ability. Before he left, he added, other than eating and sleeping, prove your worth. If you can't even save a person, you can stay here and live with the ultra beasts. Huimao was so angry that he almost chopped down all the trees in the area. Not long after, Silen came looking for him. He and Huimao had a special connection. This was also why Huimao said that they were the same kind. After checking Carrie's physical condition, Silen was relieved when he found that there weren't any particularly serious injuries. The vice-captain and the others should be with the captain now. The reinforcements are here, and they came directly with the aircraft. I left a message for them and left a signal transmitter along the way. This place is very strange. There's a strong interference effect, but as long as they fly over here, they should be able to receive the signal within a small range. Knowing that everyone was fine, Carrie was also a lot more relaxed. Wheeze is very strong. Huimao squinted his eyes, enjoying Carrie's scratching of his chin surface. When he heard this, he snorted. Silen glanced at the two and shook his head. He then walked to the red and black ultra beast that Huimao had chopped into pieces. I really don't know how many of these things there are. There were 6 of them just now. If it wasn't for Wheeze, I would have been dead, Carrie said. No, it's not. These 6 are not the group we originally encountered, Silen said with a frown. Group? Yes. They are social animals. The forest that we passed through before was a group. There are many smells in the air, including the smell of their territory. However, the smell on this one doesn't belong to that forest. Carrie's face twitched. He thought that his sense of smell was very sensitive, but he really did not smell anything special. Of course, apart from the smell of blood. They're very intelligent. At the beginning, they were probably driving the horny-skinned beasts to test us. It's not that those horny-skinned beasts are intelligent. The real masterminds are these guys and those birds in the sky. Silen pointed above his head as he said this. The snakes we encountered were thrown down by those birds circling in the sky. With the cover of the dense branches, those snakes wouldn't fall to their deaths even if they fell from the sky. These snakes should be very familiar with the smell of those horny-skinned beasts. They will chase after the smell factor in the air. And these snakes are also testing us. Carrie's mouth was wide open. Weren't these red and black ultra beasts a little too cunning? Then, for the 3rd time, they drove out even more horny-skinned beasts to exhaust our weapons and ammunition. At the same time, they closed in on us in a fan shape, forcing us back while preparing to attack from behind the horny-skinned beasts. It's like they're hunting. While they're hunting, they'll force us towards the steep slope. There will be vines entangling us along the way. They'll watch their prey struggle and force them into a corner step by step. Their goal isn't to eat, but to enjoy this pleasure and learn from it. Carrie felt a chill in his heart when he heard this. After being a hunter for so long, this was the first time he was counterattacked by an ultra beast and ended up as prey. Captain and the others are coming. Silen looked at the sky and turned around to help Carrie up. They used a hoverboard, and the 2 of them and 1 cat flew towards the slowly descending spaceplane that opened its hatch. Seeing that both Carrie and Silen were fine, Dias's worried heart finally relaxed. Let's return to the starship first. The situation this time is a little complicated. Chapter 98. The 6 advance teams all suffered casualties. Other than Dias's team and Lu Sua's team, the other 4 teams all suffered from varying degrees of death. After returning to the starship, Carrie was sent to the emergency room for treatment. Dias followed Shotten to the main starship, while Silen stayed with the rest of the team. Silen, it's all thanks to you this time. Otherwise, our team would have lost a lot of people. Xiao Shang smiled at Silen. His face was filled with exhaustion and joy. Not long after Silen left, Shotten brought the others over in a spaceplane. The remaining red and black exotic beasts stopped fighting and quickly fled. Scylla waved his hand. Is everyone alright? Their wounds have been treated. The more serious ones are still in the emergency room, but their lives are not in danger. Where's Beaver? He's in his private workshop. He's processing the data he brought back. A copy of the data was sent to the technical analysts on the 6th team's main starship for analysis. However, Beaver was itching to do the analysis himself. Scylla went to Beaver's workshop and knocked on the door. Generally speaking, Beaver did not like to be disturbed when he was working. Therefore, the doorbell was set to silent, so Scylla could only knock on the door. After knocking for a long time, Beaver finally opened the door. His eyes were bloodshot. It seemed like the data analysis was not going well. What? Beaver asked weakly. It was too mentally exhausting to analyze so much data in such a short period of time. Moreover, it was still chaotic. He kept feeling like something was missing. Let me borrow your analyzer to analyze a piece of audio. Scylla did not walk into Beaver's workshop. It was Beaver's private, forbidden area. Other than Diaz, no one else had entered it. Even the 6th team's leader, Shotten, was not included. Audio? What audio? There were some audio recordings in the information Diaz and the others collected, but they were all the sounds of the horny-skinned beasts and the red and black exotic beasts. It's a bird. Beaver's eyes flashed. Go sit in the cubicle next door. I'll analyze it immediately. Nodding, Scylla walked to the cubicle next to Beaver's studio. Hey, why are you being so secretive? Why aren't you letting me in? Hui Mao followed Scylla in and jumped onto the table, asking Scylla to pour him a glass of juice. After licking it twice in a picky manner, he raised his head and said to Scylla mysteriously, Do you want me to eavesdrop and see what data you're processing? Eavesdropping? You can find out what he's dealing with through listening. Scylla was surprised. Hui Mao raised his head as if he was the #1 expert in the world. Of course. All machines will make a specific sound, and the data they process will be spoken through language. It's just that you guys don't know about it. You guys can only know the calculation results and part of the process that are displayed on the screen. Then wouldn't we be able to eavesdrop everywhere as long as we invent a device that can receive and translate this machine language? Hearing Scylla's words, Hui Mao looked at him with disdain. Let's not talk about whether or not those low-grade machines can hear. Even if they can hear, they might not be able to understand it. For example, can you understand the indigenous language of those remote planets? In other words, the language produced by different machines is different. But why can you understand it? Agreeing with Hui Mao, Scylla knew that it was not easy to understand that kind of machine language. Otherwise, the League of Stars would have invented that kind of eavesdropping device a long time ago. There was something else that Scylla was puzzled about. Beaver's studio had very good soundproofing, so how did Hui Mao hear it? Or could it be that this kind of machine language was not sound waves? I don't know. I just know that they are talking, and I can understand them. This is the ability of the miracle life of the universe. Scylla rubbed his chin. Just as Hui Mao was about to float with pride, he grabbed one of its ears and changed the topic. Actually, you are hiding something from us, right? What? No way. Hui Mao's arrogance was blown away by Scylla's words. You are trying to cover it up. I know what you are thinking in your head the moment you move your ears. Nonsense. How is that possible? Hui Mao tried hard to control his ears and maintain a normal state. Look, your whole body is tense, as if I have seen through your thoughts. Scylla pressed a button, and a mirror appeared on the wall. In the mirror, Hui Mao looked like he was frozen and was suspiciously stiff. You don't even know how to lie. You are so stupid. You call yourself a centuries-old cyborg life form. Hui Mao opened his mouth and tried to relax his body. Then, he hugged his head on the table and curled his body into a ball, ignoring everyone. Looking at this guy's awkward look, Silen flicked the tip of Huimao's ear in amusement. Alright, don't be shy. This is also a learning process. If you meet some crazy researchers, they will dig out all your information with just a few words and then dissect you in detail. Silen didn't want to scare it, but some of the researchers in the League of Stars were too crazy. They would really do anything, no matter the cost, by hook or by crook. Huimao's situation was too special. Compared to the cyborg life forms that had been recorded, Huimao definitely had more research value. He belonged to a different kind of existence. Silen was afraid that one day in the future, if everyone didn't have the ability to protect Huimao, this guy would be able to survive with his own ability. He wouldn't be sold by someone and still have to pay for the person. Huimao's claws that were hugging his head loosened, but his body was still curled into a ball. Silen rubbed Huimao, who was curled into a ball, hard. Still throwing a tantrum like a child. After a pause, Silen smiled and said, "You actually found a mine, right?" How did you know?" Huimao suddenly raised his head. Silen smiled but didn't say anything. He was just speculating based on various situations. As for what exactly it was, he didn't have a conclusion. However, since Huimao had this reaction, it was true. I've read some articles in high-contribution journals. Some researchers say that in some high-energy states, cyborg life forms will be forced to turn into a carbon-based state. That's because in that state, their mechanical form will be seriously affected. Huimao thought about it and shook his head. I don't know. I don't have that kind of feeling. Even though I wasn't used to it when I was near the mine area, I'll be fine after some adjustment. It's nothing. If that's the case, it might be the function of the white sphere. Yes, it must be. Let's not talk about the white sphere. About the energy mine, if I can guess it, those experienced analysts should be able to guess it as well. Ah. Huimao was stunned for a moment. Then he shouted, "It's all your fault. If you didn't call me over, I could have gone to mine the mine. I let them have it for free." Silen reached out and knocked on the cat's head. You still say, them. No matter what, they are part of this hunter team. If the team can find the mine, it will be very beneficial for their future development. Without the energy mine, whose starship will you fly around? If you collect the energy mine, won't you eat it? Huimao thought about it and agreed, but he was still a little unwilling. He whispered, I can get the energy mine to repay my debt. Alright, don't worry about it. Silen rubbed Huimao's head. You saved Carrie and found the mine. I'll give you a 100 million off. Really? Huimao's eyes lit up. It had only been a short while, and he could repay 1/5 of his debt. It seemed that the day when he would be free from debt slavery was not far away. As they were talking, Silen and Huimao sensed movement beside them and stopped talking. Soon, Beaver came over and said excitedly, the analysis is out. I've also figured out some of the problems. Silen, let's go find the vice captain. This is an important clue. Silen did not leave. You go find the vice captain first. We'll announce the results when the time comes. Alright, I'll go first. Silen, you've done a great job this time. Beaver was very excited to be able to analyze more information than the analysis team on the 6th team's flagship. Watching Beaver leave, Silen sat down again. He already knew what Beaver had analyzed. He had passed the audio to Beaver to analyze so that Beaver could tell Diaz about the missing information. However, it seemed that the real important thing was not the beasts. Chapter 99. Without waiting for Beaver to leave the team's starship, Diaz returned. After communicating with Beaver for a while, he called all the team members over and summarized the results of the analysis team and Beaver's analysis for everyone. What we faced before was a highly intelligent species. It wasn't just one, but two species acting in concert. The so-called highly intelligent species was the standard used to measure animals, not humans. A highly intelligent species might not necessarily be smarter than humans, but they were definitely not stupid either. Diaz pulled up the images of the red and black exotic beasts and the birds in the sky on the big screen. There are also 2 images taken from high up in the sky. I believe everyone will have a better understanding of them after seeing them. In the image, there was a basin with many stone circles made out of huge rocks, and the horny-skinned beasts were being kept in the stone circles. Outside the stone circles were some red and black exotic beasts pacing back and forth. The image changed to a cave. Around the cave were birds that resembled eagles of prey. They used their sharp beaks and claws to tear the horny-skinned beasts apart before tossing them into the cave. The series of actions were very practiced, and it was obvious that they had done this many times before. The team did not know what the depths of the cave looked like, but from the creatures that crawled out of the cave, everyone knew that this was a snake cave. There were many snake species that would not eat dead or still objects, but it was obvious that this was not the case. When the minced meat was tossed down, they fought to snatch it. Neither of these 2 creatures are at the top of this planet. There are many creatures that are larger and more lethal than them, but these 2 creatures are living very well. The reason is because of their cooperation, a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship. When the birds encounter their natural enemies, they will run to the red and black exotic beasts for protection, and when large beasts that pose a threat to the red and black exotic beasts approach, the birds will also warn them. After a long period of evolution, they have become more and more adept at interacting with each other, and at the same time, their intelligence has also increased. Diaz switched to another image. This is the scene when the team leaders came to support them, and they retreated. Look at the eyes of this big guy when they retreated. It was a kind of unwillingness to give up, just like a human's. An animal's intelligence can be reflected in its eyes. The higher its intelligence, the stronger its ability to learn. When the Miantuan saw the look, it quickly hid beside Beaver's trousers. What a scary look, as if it was going to jump out and eat it. As for Hui Mao, he only glanced at it calmly, then yawned and went back to sleep. Sleep after eating. Yes, that was the truth. No wonder I felt like I was being played. Carrie sighed as he sat on a chair after treating his wounds. Yudi gave him a sideways glance. Now you know the consequences of a hunter having a lower IQ than his prey. Carrie's face twitched, and he wished he could slap himself. Why did he speak at this time? Wasn't this purely asking for contempt? The members of the team thought deeply about what Diaz said. This meant that they were going to face 2 highly intelligent animals that cooperated with each other. At the same time, they did not know what other trump cards these 2 creatures had. However, if they wanted to understand this planet with a level B habitability, they had to face these 2 creatures. Many people were deep in thought after listening to him, and so was Silen. However, it was not because of what Diaz had said, but because of something else. Although his eyes were fixed on the big screen, his attention was on the data monitor that he could not see on the other side. That was the monitor that they had sent to orbit the planet. As it orbited the planet, it monitored some of the conditions on the planet, such as the general image, local weather conditions, energy detection, and so on. Ever since we spoke the machine language, Silen had paid special attention to it. When his concentration was at its peak, he really could hear some things. When he converted these things into words and images in his head, he could see some vague images that he couldn't see clearly at all. Even so, it was enough to excite Silen. He was sure that it was the machine language that Hui Mao had mentioned. Hui Mao, who had been sleeping on his stomach, twitched his ears, and his closed eyes suddenly opened. He looked at Silen with a strange gaze, but he seemed to understand something and immediately felt relieved. He buried his head and continued to sleep. After explaining it to everyone, Diaz's expression turned serious. Silen thought, the real show is coming. Diaz cleared his throat and said solemnly, after saying so much, let's get to the main point. According to the analysis of the main ship's analysis team, there may be a large amount of energy ores on this planet. It's just that for some unknown reason, we are temporarily unable to detect them. Therefore, Our next mission is to return to the planet for further energy detection. The technical team has already modified the detection parameters and optimized the detectors. The new detectors will be sent over tomorrow. Before the detectors are sent over, everyone should rest well. Once we return to the surface, we will have to face more than just these two intelligent life forms. The moment the gray cat heard the word energy ores, its ears immediately perked up with a whoosh. Although it still had its eyes closed and head buried, its ears betrayed its current mood. Seeing this, Scylla sighed inwardly. As expected of a cat. After the small team meeting, Scylla returned to the lounge and sat down. Hui Mao jumped onto Scylla's lap. Are we only looking for one of the energy ores? Scylla thinks for a moment and said, I don't know, but the 6 teams will be sent out separately to explore different areas. Maybe the other teams will be in charge of other energy ores. How many do you know? Scylla had seen the images taken by the orbiting detection satellite and a few simple parameters. From these parameters, Scylla speculated that there might be more than one energy ore, but he did not know how many there were. After all, the data was limited. He believed that the main ship's analysis team would have a more accurate conclusion. However, compared to the analysis team, Scylla trusted Hui Mao's judgment more. Hui Mao narrowed his eyes. The area I ran was limited, but within this area, I found 2 types. One is in that forest, and the other is in that green river. Scylla nodded. These 2 places were indeed strange. When he thought that so many energy ores would be confiscated, Hui Mao was a little dispirited. Seeing that Hui Mao was a little unhappy, Scylla pulled its ear. If you can find the energy ores before the detectors, you can eat some first. Really? I won't be kicked out of the team and thrown to stay with those ugly people on the planet? Don't worry, as long as you limit your appetite, I believe the captain and the others will understand. What a joke. Who would be stupid enough to kick a cyborg out? There were many smart people in the team, and they knew what was at stake. Hee, alright, I'll definitely find the energy ores before those stupid machines. When the time comes, I'll eat first and tell you guys when I'm full. Great, this guy was getting carried away again. Stupid, just keep that last sentence in your heart. Don't say it out loud, you'll get beaten up. Scylla cupped Hui Mao's head and said. Yes, keep it in my heart. I'll say it in my heart next time. I won't say it out loud. Hui Mao was happy and did not mind Scylla beating its head. During the time they returned to the surface of the planet, Hui Mao was always in a state of excitement. It patrolled the starship 3 times a day, but everyone was used to it. Carrie even brought food for Hui Mao every day to thank it for saving his life. When the Hoodie spacecraft landed on this piece of land again, the hatch opened, and Hui Mao ran away. Chapter 100. Due to the importance of the energy ores, the 6th team had even sent out fighter jets this time. There were aircraft and fighter jets in the air, and the birds wouldn't hover above them to inform the red and black exotic beasts to cooperate with them. The red and black exotic beasts only watched from afar and didn't come over. They knew that it wouldn't end well for them if they forced their way in. Tang Qiuqiu followed beside Dias. She held a gun in her hand, but her eyes were curiously looking at the plants around her. She had seen some strange plants in the videos before, and seeing them with her own eyes gave her a different feeling. Well, she had to record more videos as souvenirs. This area was the territory of the red and black exotic beasts. No matter which group they belonged to, they wouldn't act rashly if they saw such a situation. It was precisely because they were smarter than the other animals that they wouldn't act rashly. Without the threat of these 2 exotic beasts for the time being, Dias's team could spend more energy searching for the energy ores. For the sake of these energy ores, they had even sent out some technicians. They had wanted to send out some robots as well, but the closer they were to the ground, the greater the interference the machines would receive, and their programs would be a little messed up. This was something that would happen in a high-energy field. This was also the reason why they rarely used weapons that could trigger the energy ores here. In the end, they still rejected this idea and sent out manpower to search for the energy ores. However, even after modifying the parameters and optimizing the detector, it still didn't show any specific information. It couldn't detect the specific location, and it only showed that there were energy ores. If they were to blindly mine, they would probably use up all the energy they brought along. By the time the manpower they had mobilized was almost exhausted, the energy ores might not even show up. Yudi held the detector casually. Right now, he was only holding it for show. From the looks of it, the modified detector by the technical team wasn't of any use at all. If they were to continue searching like this, they might starve to death and still not get any results. The Miantuan lay obediently on Yudi's shoulder. It didn't want to be left on the starship, but it was too timid. Once it got out of the aircraft, it stayed close to Yudi. It didn't dare to run around randomly like the Huimao. 8 hours later, Diaz sighed. There was still no progress. If it really didn't work, he could only ask for permission to open a few random holes. Both fighters and spaceplanes consumed a lot of energy. If they couldn't find any energy here, then they would have suffered a great loss. They still had to stay in Sector Z for a while, and if they couldn't replenish their energy and deplete their reserves prematurely, then they would face a very difficult situation. DDD, the alarm indicated that there were animal life forms coming their way at high speed. The members of the advance team, who had similar experiences before, reflexively tensed their nerves and quickly adjusted their state of mind. They ignored the detectors and prepared their firepower first. It couldn't be helped. Once bitten, twice shy. It was just a conditioned reflex. Could it be that there were waves and waves of traps waiting in front of him? Wait, it's Wheeze. Sillin motioned for everyone to calm down. That guy probably found the energy ores. The first sentence did relax everyone's taut nerves a little, but the second sentence was undoubtedly another bomb. They had wasted 8 hours exploring with the detectors. In order to record accurate data and send it back to the starship for parameter calculation and further upgrade of the detectors, everyone was on foot. Not only did they have to be vigilant of the animals and plants around them, they also had to keep an eye on the detectors for minute changes. It was practically exhausting. But the cat that ran away the moment the hatch opened could find the energy ores? If that was true, then they were practically trash compared to a cat. A gray shadow flashed by and jumped onto Sillin's shoulder. It was none other than Huimao's Wheeze. Sillin raised his hand and placed it next to its mouth. Then, Huimao spat out a fingernail-sized black and red crystal with a spit. After checking the size of the crystal, Sillin glanced meaningfully at Huimao. Huimao turned its head and looked at the surrounding scenery with an innocent expression. It had indeed eaten a meal before coming over, and when it came over, it had specifically bitten off a crystal the size of an egg. However, as it held it in its mouth, it had unknowingly absorbed some of the crystal, reducing it to the size of a fingernail. When Huimao spat out the small crystal, everyone's eyes were focused on Sillin's hand. Sillin handed the crystal to Diaz. Diaz carefully took the small black and red crystal. It was obviously a deep black and red, but it gave off a sparkling and translucent feeling. At the same time, it was so deep that it was full of fatal temptation. Diaz slowly brought the small black and red crystal in his hand closer to the detector. When it was about 5 meters away, the detector suddenly had an abnormal reaction. As the distance got closer, the detector's sound became more rapid and sharp. After a rapid high-frequency sound, the detector exploded. At this time, the crystal in Diaz's hand was still more than 3 meters away from the detector. Only less than 2 meters could cause such a huge change. It had to be said that this energy ore was amazing. What a powerful energy field. Everyone's eyes shone. An energy ore of this quality only needed a cube that was about a meter long to make up for all the energy they had used up since they entered Sector Z. This reminds me of those black and red alien beasts, and those horny-skinned beasts with slightly black keratin and bony plates on the front half of their bodies. Maybe it's because of this energy or buried under the ground that the high energy field produced by this energy or had stimulated them to develop hard epidermis even when they couldn't sense the existence of the energy field. After a long period of evolution, this hard epidermis gradually developed completely. Yudi analyzed. Other than the animals, the plants in the forest are also slightly hard. Maybe it really is because of this energy or... If this guess is correct, then we have truly found a treasure. Dias looked at the black and red crystal in his hand and said excitedly. The appearance of every new high-quality energy ore would set off a wave, and the sixth team's trip this time was definitely not in vain. As long as they could get their hands on this energy ore, their sixth team would be able to stand tall in the entire Vanguard Hunter Regiment even if they didn't gain anything else in Sector Z. Wheeze, you really are the treasure of our squad. Ha! Carrie tossed the detector aside and walked over to scratch Huimao's chin. Huimao narrowed his eyes in enjoyment, but Silen knew that it wasn't Carrie's praise or chin scratching. It was because the cat had eaten its fill and was thinking about sleeping. Ha, Wheeze, where did you find this? Bring us over to take a look. Dias spoke to Huimao in a tone one would use between friends. He didn't mean to order it at all. He knew that this cat was special. Huimao swatted away Carrie's hand, tilted its head and scratched its neck with its hind legs. Then, it yawned and stuck out its butt, stretched its waist and smacked its lips. Finally, it said slowly, sure. It jumped down from Silen's shoulder in a flash and ran in a certain direction. Hurry up and keep up. Dias directly used his hoverboard. Those who had hoverboards behind them also used theirs and flew over. Those who did not have hoverboards returned to the aircraft and followed the people who were in front of them. Huimao led them through a series of twists and turns until they reached a certain part of the forest. The density of the trees there was very high, and the trunks of the trees were getting thicker and thicker. Everyone had to squeeze in one by one. Those who were slightly fatter or those with more developed muscles might not be able to make it through. When Dias wanted to use his knife to chop off a few branches, he realized that the trees there looked similar to the trees in the forest, but they were at least 10 times harder. Dias didn't order them to cut down the trees on a large scale. His intention was to first find the location of the energy mine and then deal with it according to the situation. Just as Dias felt that his bones were starting to deform from being squeezed, Huimao turned to look at him. You can't squeeze in anymore. That's fine too. There are energy ores all over this area. After taking 2 deep breaths, Dias asked, the range of energy ores starts from here. Huimao had an innocent look on his face. No, it starts from the place where some of you with more developed muscles couldn't squeeze in. Dias, his eyes nearly rolled back and he vomited blood. Dias was filled with regret. The place that Huimao had mentioned was more than 500 meters from where they were. In other words, when he had squeezed so hard that his internal organs were about to deform, he was told that he had squeezed for more than 500 meters for nothing. Why didn't you say so earlier? Dias gritted his teeth. Because the quality of the energy ores there was not good. The one I gave you is better than the one there. However, you still have to go further in. Huimao didn't seem to have done anything wrong. Beside him, Silen shook his head. This cat was really slow. It just looked smart. Chapter 101. Dias, with a face full of resentment, squeezed his way back to instruct his men to start mining. Mining in this place was not an easy task. Dias sighed in his heart. There were so many technicians and so-called professionals, but they could not even compare to a simple-minded cat. As for Silen, who had a strange bone structure, Dias and the others had always thought that Silen was born with the ability to change his bone structure and body shape. Silen followed Huimao and continued walking. Dias did not say anything. It was always better if someone could follow the cat and see what was going on. As they continued walking, even a person as thin as a bamboo pole might not be able to squeeze in. Many times, Silen's bones would be dislocated in order to pass through the narrow gap, and then straighten again. If Dias and the others knew that Silen was playing with his bones like a jigsaw puzzle, their jaws would probably drop to the ground. "Ah, it's here!" Hui Mao shouted from not far ahead. Silen took a few more steps forward and realized that from this point onward, there were no trees. The ground was covered with a layer of rocks, which looked similar to the rocks in other places. Silen took out his knife and stabbed it into the ground. The rocks here were very hard, and even if he stabbed for a long time, he might not be able to stab very deep. If he used too much force, the knife in his hand might even break. Below the rocks was a layer of rock. According to Hui Mao, the black and red energy ores were below this layer. Silen could also feel that this place was different, and some of the factors in his body began to stir. If this was the core of the black and red energy ores, it was hard to imagine that the strength of the energy fields in this vast forest, as well as the large area around it, was similar. Other than the core area, the energy fields covering such a wide area further highlighted the uniqueness of the energy ores. This rocky area was not exposed to the outside world. The sky was densely covered with spreading branches, which was why this rocky area was not found in the images taken by the orbiting satellite probes. In the middle of the rocky area, there was a hole that had been dug. It was Hui Mao's masterpiece. Silen walked to the side to take a look. The rock layer was about 15 meters deep, and below that were the black-red energy ores. However, that was only the information that Silen could glean from the cave walls. As for this hole, the black-red energy ores that extended from 15 meters underground to 30 meters underground had all been destroyed by Hui Mao. At this time, the cat jumped in and continued to eat, as if it was chewing on ice. If Carrie saw this, he would probably worship it again. No matter how intelligent an animal was, it would not eat energy ores as if they were food and crunch them loudly, right? Silen jumped into the cave and touched the black-red cave wall with his fingers. When we spat the red-black energy into his hand, Silen didn't test it because he was being stared at by so many people. In fact, a series of changes had started happening inside Silen's body the moment he came into contact with the energy. It was as if he was trying to absorb all of the energy inside the energy. If Silen had not forcefully suppressed this change, by the time it landed on Dias's hand, it would have shrunk to the size of a grain of rice. Silen could feel the boiling factors in his body yearning for this kind of energy. Although Silen did not understand what would happen, he knew that it was definitely not a bad thing. When he touched the black-red energy ores on the cave wall, the cold feeling from his fingers did not last long before it was replaced by a scorching heat. Silen felt like there was a whirlpool in his body, crazily absorbing the energy contained in the black-red energy ores that his fingers touched. This kind of energy made the chips in his body become active and stimulated the metabolism in his body. At this moment, Silen could feel that there was no change in his genetic information, but the information that was transcribed from his DNA was different every time. In other words, every time it was transcribed, the original information would be automatically edited, so that the final information that was transcribed would be different. This seemed to be an experiment, using the energy absorbed to supply energy for the experiment. At the same time, this energy also provided a comparison, so that each experiment would get closer and closer to the point that this energy measured. The chips integrated into his genes stimulated some of the silent areas in his genes to start expressing themselves. At this moment, Silen felt as if he was being painted layer by layer, and then this paint seeped into his body. Not only the surface of his body, but the organs in his body, from the tissues to the cells, were all undergoing strengthening experiments over and over again, until the most suitable and most advantageous point was found. Hui Mao, who was originally leaning on the cave wall and gnawing on the energy ores, suddenly felt that something was wrong and turned his head. What the heck? Hui Mao was so shocked by Silen's current state that he slipped and fell from the cave wall. Fortunately, he was a cat, and after twisting his body and landing on the ground, Hui Mao immediately ran to Silen's side. However, he did not get close to Silen, because there was a strange aura around Silen at this moment. Moreover, Silen's entire body had turned black-red, and the color was deepening until it was almost the same color as the energy ores on the cave wall. Hui Mao circled around Silen twice, then sat down helplessly. He propped himself up on his forelimbs and stared unblinkingly at Sillin, who was touching the cave wall with one hand, eyes closed and brows furrowed, and his entire body was black-red. At the place where Sillin's fingers touched, the cave wall began to slowly sink inwards. Then, around Sillin's fingers, the depression began to gradually expand. Hui Mao knew that this was because Sillin had absorbed all the energy contained in the energy ores. However, even if it was Hui Mao, it had only eaten them first, then digested and absorbed them. Although the absorption was fast, it was not as efficient as this fellow, right? What the hell was this fellow doing? Why did he need to consume so much energy? As he watched, Hui Mao fell into deep thought. Yes, it thought that it was deep thought, but according to Sillin's standards, it was actually in a daze. Pain, intense pain. It was as if every part of his body, from the inside to the outside, was being torn apart and reassembled once again. Sillin had always felt that if he wanted to activate the remaining portion of the chip, he might need to increase his stamina or work hard to upgrade his gene to A rank. However, he had always neglected one thing. The small portion of the chip that had yet to be activated was also the most crucial part. If he wanted to activate it, not only would it be a matter of increasing his strength, he would also need a large amount of energy. However, the energy that could allow the activated chip to automatically experiment until the main body was upgraded to the most suitable point was no ordinary energy. At least until now, other than this black-red energy ore, all the energy ores that Sillin had come into contact with before, regardless of whether they were good or bad in the eyes of others, could not be activated. Chapter 102. Within his body, the experiments led by the AI chip were carried out again and again, and Sillin was enduring more and more pain each time. However, Sillin was very happy. He knew that this was not a bad thing. This was also the most important opportunity since he had been injected with the AI chip for more than a year. He did not know how long this pain lasted, but suddenly, a feeling of enlightenment came over him, and he instantly felt a sense of comfort. At the same time, the black and red color on the surface of Sillin's body slowly faded until it disappeared, and Sillin seemed to have returned to his original appearance. Sillin stretched his arms a little. He felt good, very good. Even if he was not in a solidified state, he believed that his current body would be able to withstand even stronger attacks. He was very clear about his current state. Although the AI chip in his body had been activated a little, it was still in an incomplete state. However, Sillin was also satisfied. This opportunity allowed Sillin's gene rank to evolve again after more than a year. A-rank gene. Yes, the A-rank gene that many people yearn for even in their dreams. For Sillin, the shadow hunter who had once lived in a poor little town and could not see the light of day on that underdeveloped planet, it was indeed a distant existence. However, that time, he had met Ori and was injected with the AI chip as a test subject. His gene rank had jumped to B rank, and now it had evolved again to A rank. However, Sillin was still clear-headed, and this situation was only temporary. Whether the existence of the AI chip was ultimately a blessing or a curse, Sillin himself could not say for sure. Letting out a long sigh, Sillin looked at Hui Mao, who was sitting there in a daze with his front limbs propped up. He knew that this fellow had slipped away again. Hugh! Hui Mao, who was in a daze, suddenly heard a loud shout accompanied by sound waves. He immediately arched his back and jumped high in the air. Sillin held back his laughter. This fellow was really scared. After Hui Mao landed on the ground, he huffed and puffed a few times. Then, he turned his head and jumped onto the stone wall to vent his anger on the energy ores, expressing his emotions very well. I am not in a good mood. Hui Mao probably knew that he was in a daze and jumped up reflexively because of a cry. He felt very embarrassed, so now Hui Mao was throwing a tantrum again. Alright, Wheeze, don't be angry. Let's go and find the vice-captain, Sillin said. Hui Mao ignored him and continued gnawing on the black and red walls of the mine. Snore. Hui Mao flicked his ears and continued to ignore him. Silen sighed. Even though it was a cyborg, it could not get rid of the fact that it was a cat. Cats were a little willful and did things their own way. You clearly heard it, but you pretended not to know. You're so awkward, and you even bear a grudge. Walking over, Silen directly pulled Hui Mao down from the wall of the mine and jumped out of the cave with it in his arms. Although Hui Mao, who had a "I don't want to talk to you" attitude and had pointed its tail at Silen, was dragged out of the cave by Silen like a child, Hui Mao only struggled a little symbolically to express its dissatisfaction. However, it was not stupid. Now was not the time for it to gnaw on the energy ores unscrupulously. Since Silen gave it a way out, Hui Mao also gave face and stepped down. Of course, this gave face had always been what Hui Mao thought. When Silen and Hui Mao saw Dias was discussing mining matters with a few team members and technicians. There was a tree that had been cut in half and left there untouched. When Silen arrived, Dias and the others had just come to a decision. They would start digging a mine at the periphery where the trees were still sparse, and then extend the mine underground to the place where the ores were stored until they reached the central area Hui Mao mentioned. Only then would they start mining on a large scale. Otherwise, it would be too much of a waste to only get the low-quality ores after spending so much effort. Also, if they were to cut down the trees in the forest, Dias was worried that it would expose the mineral deposits in this area. After all, Vanguard's 6th team was not the only one who had entered Sector Z. If there was another company who happened to find this planet and effortlessly set their eyes on these mineral deposits before they reported to the A Squad, then the 6th Division would die an unjust death. After Dias contacted Schotten also agreed to this method. Because the energy ores were too special, it was best to conceal them as much as possible. Silen talked to Dias alone and explained to Dias that Hui Mao could eat energy ores. Otherwise, how was he going to explain to the team that there was such a big hole there? Moreover, Silen thinks that Dias had learned about Hui Mao's situation from Carrie a long time ago. He knew that Hui Mao was a cyborg. Since they knew about it, then smart people like Dias and Schotten would naturally know the value represented by cyborg lifeforms. It would be a great help to them in the end. Right now was the time for the 6th Division to work hard to develop. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in such a hurry to recruit talents. However, Silen's own secret couldn't be exposed, so he could only let Hui Mao suffer. Of course, Silen and Hui Mao had discussed this. As for taking the blame, Hui Mao didn't say anything, but he didn't object either. He just remained silent because he was still at odds with Hui Mao. Silen knew that this guy had actually agreed. He rubbed Hui Mao's head and said, "When the time comes, they will ask you to look for the other kinds of mineral deposits." Hui Mao's ears pricked up. Of course, it could hear the hidden meaning in Silen's words. It could eat them again after it was found. Dias's team was very excited about mining. The whole team had recovered from their previous depression, so everyone's attitude towards Hui Mao was very good. They knew that this cat was not ordinary. Thanks to this cat, their team was the first out of the 6 teams to discover the mineral deposit and start mining. "Vice Captain, the captain is looking for you." A team member came over from the aircraft on a hoverboard and handed the communicator to Dias. The closer they got to the mineral deposit, the stronger the signal interference. Therefore, in this area, communication equipment was not very good. If they wanted to communicate, they could only fly into the air and stay further away from the ground. Unlike the forest where the signal was intermittent, there was no signal at all around the ground. Dias accepted the communicator, launched his hoverboard and flew into the air. A while later, he came down and said to Silen with a smile, "You and we should head over to the other squads. Their exploration isn't going too well, so a spaceplane will come and pick you up later." "Is there a problem?" "No." Before Silen could answer, Hui Mao agreed eagerly. It was obvious that he couldn't wait. Dias moved closer to Hui Mao's ear and whispered, "When you eat, be discreet. Take turns to work. If there's anything, look for Captain Schotten." Huimao's round eyes were bright, and he said in a tone that said, "Of course." 5 minutes later, an aircraft flew over. Sillin and Huimao boarded it on a hoverboard. After the aircraft flew away, Beaver said doubtfully, "There's something wrong with Sillin. It feels different from before." "Of course." Diaz smiled happily. "That guy has already evolved to rank A." Sillin did not deliberately hide it. There was a slight resonance between rank A and rank A genes. This slight resonance did not exist among the ranks below rank A. As long as one did not deliberately hide it, if the other party was sensitive to this slight resonance, they would be able to detect it. That's good news. Our team is going to make a name for themselves. When that guy was rank B, he wasn't any weaker than Carrie. "Vice Captain, I think Sillin is our team's lucky star," Carrie said. Diaz raised his head. "Of course. Don't you know who discovered this star?" Chapter 103. On the spaceplane, Sha Tun looked very happy at the data displayed by the energy analyzer in his hand. He promised repeatedly that he would not mistreat the gray cat as long as it could find the source of the energy. He even promised to give the gray cat tens of thousands of GAL credits. Although this amount of money was too little for the gray cat since it had always measured money in the hundreds of millions, it was still meat no matter how small a mosquito was. The gray cat accepted the money out of respect, and most importantly, Sha Tun allowed it to give the gray cat special treatment openly. When he found out that Sillin's gene level had evolved to grade A, Sha Tun congratulated him happily and did not ask too many questions. The first place they arrived at was where the Cold Beauty Ash's team was. Previously, Ash's team had landed at a place where the rivers crisscrossed. From the sky, all they could see was a green river. Unlike the creatures in the forest, which had hard skin on their bodies, there were not many animals with hard skin on their bodies in this green river. Some small mammals like rabbits were active in the area around the river. However, they had a special characteristic: their bodies were generally green. The creatures in the river were not to be underestimated. Just like the green blobs that Carrie had encountered before, they all carried deadly toxins. One of the members of Ash's team had almost lost his life in the hands of these small blobs. These green blobs were originally flat like leaves in the river. However, when they discovered prey on the surface of the water, they would fill their bodies with gas and float to the surface of the water. Then, they would swim toward the prey and inject the toxins into the tissues of the prey, causing these parts to become soft and fluid for them to absorb. There were many hidden dangers in the river, especially a type of large jellyfish. Their long tentacles would extend out of the water to capture the land creatures that were closer to the river. There were also some amphibians that Asha and the rest had been guarding against. When Sillin and Huimao arrived, Asha and the rest were resting at a place far away from the river bank. Sha Tun asked them to stop what they were doing and wait. Up until now, they had made no progress in their exploration. Moreover, 10 minutes ago, they had exchanged fire with more than 10 frog-like big guys. Asha and the rest had been exploring for a long time, but they still had no idea where to start. The technicians were sweating profusely and constantly changed the parameters of the detector to better match the situation here. However, the results were not satisfactory. When they heard that Captain Sha Tun had a solution, they could finally rest more comfortably. However, they did not expect that the solution that they had been waiting for was a cat. They had also heard that Diaz's team had a cat that always followed the Miantuan into trouble. Asha looked at Huimao, who was sniffing left and right on Sillin's shoulder. She frowned and said nothing. Sha Tun said to Asha, "Get everyone ready. We're going to start looking for oars. Those who have hoverboards, get on the hoverboards. Those who don't, get on the aircraft. Also, get your weapons ready in case those things in the river come out and cause trouble again." After saying that, Sha Tun turned to look at Huimao with a smile. "Wheeze, please." Huimao ignored him. After sniffing and confirming a direction, it jumped down from Sillin's shoulder and ran in a certain direction. Sillin activated his hoverboard and followed behind. Shotten signaled for everyone to follow. However, Shotten did not get on the aircraft. Instead, he activated the hoverboard in his backpack and chased after the gray shadow with Silen. Hui Mao only wanted to find the energy ore as soon as possible, so it chose the shortest route, a straight line. Regardless of whether it was land or a river, Hui Mao was still traveling in a straight line. Because of this, everyone was surprised. At first, Shotten was going to ask someone to help clear away the green obstacles next to Hui Mao, but Silen said that it was fine and that the little guy could handle it. What happened later proved that it was true. Fuck, this cat could actually swim, and it swam faster than fish in the water. Fuck, why was the cat covered in those green obstacles? It shook itself on the shore and was completely fine. What kind of cat was this? It could actually swim in such a dangerous place as if it was playing. When the jellyfish reached out their skilled hands, the people in the sky fired their guns. Although everyone's target was the jellyfish, it was still a jellyfish and a hail of bullets. If it had been someone else, they would have been scared out of their wits, or at least panicked. However, this cat continued to swim as usual, turning a deaf ear to what was happening around it. It was very calm. Looking at Silen, it was true that the cat was like its owner. It was as calm as the wind without a trace. Not long after, Hui Mao stopped on a piece of land at the junction of two rivers. Then, Hui Mao began to dig a hole. Its two front paws were like drills, and in a short while, it had completely drilled into the ground. Asha and the others watched with their mouths twitching. This cat. Not only was it good at swimming like a fish, it could also dig holes like a mouse. Shotten gestured for everyone to wait on the surface. Silen looked around. There were no trees or tall plants on this piece of land. It was covered with a thick layer of something that looked like moss. A technician used an instrument to measure it. The photosynthesis of this moss-like plant was actually more than 200 times faster than that of normal moss. Previously, they had discovered that the concentration of oxygen in the air near the river was very high, but that level of oxygen concentration was still bearable. However, the oxygen concentration here was too high. If this continued for a long time, everyone would suffer from oxygen poisoning. Therefore, everyone put on a mask. The mask would adjust the oxygen concentration in the air to an acceptable range. After about an hour, Hui Mao jumped out and spat out a small emerald green piece in front of Silen. Even though it was such a small piece, it seemed to reflect a lush world that was full of vitality. Seeing this emerald green energy ore, even the usually calm Asha could not help but feel excited. She had never seen this kind of energy ore before. This was the energy ore that they were looking for. Although it was only slightly more than an hour, it was enough for Hui Mao to have a good meal down there. Since they knew that there was an energy ore here, Shotten, Asha, and the others began to formulate a plan. From time to time, they would ask Hui Mao about it. Hui Mao licked his paws and wiped his beard as he answered lazily. "How does the ore taste?" Silen asked. Hui Mao smirked. "The taste is not bad. If the black and red energy ore is meat, then this emerald energy ore is vegetables. Just like how I occasionally eat vegetables. Eating vegetables helps to reduce internal heat, and it's also beneficial to me. Indeed, cats would sometimes eat grass." Hui Mao jumped onto Silen's shoulder and whispered into Silen's ear, "Swim to the bottom of the river. You'll be able to reach the energy ore." Silen thinks for a moment, then walked over to Shotten and said, "Captain, Whis and I will go down to the river to take a look. It's said that we might be able to reach the energy ore from there." "That's a good idea. Although it will be more difficult to mine from the river, it will be more hidden. Should we send someone to help?" Shotten said. "No need. Whis and I can handle it." "Alright, be careful." After Silen and Hui Mao jumped into the river, Asha said, "You trust him that much?" Whether it was his ability or his character. Shotten smiled. "I trust Dias." Asha was silent after hearing that, but her furrowed brows were smoothed out. Chapter 104. Silen followed Hui Mao downstream. With his current physique, he could withstand the water pressure and dive for a long time without relying on a mask. Therefore, when Silen jumped into the water without wearing protective clothing or a mask, and without using a small submarine, some people on the shore were a little dumbfounded. Although it was only a river, its depth made many people flinch. The further down they went, the less light penetrated. At first, there were some dense water plants on the stone walls, and some plant-eating fish were looking for food around the water plants. As they continued to go down, the water plants decreased, and the surroundings became darker. This kind of environment made the hidden murderous intent in the darkness even stronger, and people could not help but feel anxious and panicked. However, Silen and Hui Mao did not feel the slightest bit of such emotions. There was no need for an underwater searchlight. With just a little bit of light, Silen could clearly see this area, and the source of this little bit of light was some glowing river mussels attached to the stone walls. Those magical light sources were what they used to attract prey. Perhaps it was because there were energy ores here, so these river mussels had evolved special suckers to attach to the walls. You would be wrong if you thought of them as normal river mussels. These river mussels ranged from 1 meter to 5 meters in length, and Silen could clearly see that there were some barbed teeth hidden inside their shells. When a prey came close to the mussel, these sharp teeth would firmly hook the prey in place. There was also the clamping pressure of the mussel shell. In this part of the river, there should be very few prey that had fallen into the trap and escaped. As soon as he turned his head, Silen found that the stupid cat had come close to the mussel, and only its fat butt, 2 hind legs, and tail were exposed. Knowing that there was no one else here, Hui Mao became angry. His whole head directly turned into a mechanical form, and it was the enlarged type. He swallowed the whole mussel, and then returned to his small cat form. Not far away, there was a fish almost 10 meters long swimming in this direction, ready to sprint to catch prey. When it saw this scene, it flicked its tail, turned around, and ran away. It seemed that the intelligence of the animals here was not low. Hui Mao shook his head. He was very unhappy about being caught, but he went up to it out of curiosity. In the end, he felt that the mussel was not bad, but he was caught before he could bite into it. Hui Mao turned around and swam 2 steps. It stopped and spat out a green bead. It was the thing inside the mussel. Silen caught the orb before it could sink into the ground. Pearls? Silen looked at this green bead. It didn't have any energy fluctuations, but it had a feeling of vitality. Obviously, it couldn't emit light, but because of the reflective effect, it reflected the light emitted by the mussels next to it with a kind of psychedelic brilliance. What is this? Even though they were underwater, Hui Mao's words were not affected. Silen made a gesture. It was a gesture that Hui Mao was familiar with. It meant money. In other words, this thing was worth a lot of money. Hui Mao didn't look for energy ores anymore. After it came close to the bead and sniffed, it spread its limbs and began to search along the mussels one after another. However, this time, it wasn't stupid enough to go close directly. Although these mussels didn't cause any harm to it, it was embarrassing to be caught. This one doesn't have it, and this one doesn't have it either. Oh, this one does, but it's too small. As long as there was a green pearl, Hui Mao would directly swallow the whole mussel and then spit out the pearl. Eat the mussels, keep the valuable things. In the end, Hui Mao directly swallowed all the mussels with the green pearls, and then spat them all out for Silen. This was what it needed to repay its debt. After a while, Hui Mao finished his inspection. He counted a total of more than 20 mussels. Many of the mussels didn't have green pearls, and among these 20, most of them were on the small side. There were only 5 big ones. Silen put all these into the leaf ring. This was Hui Mao's personal item, but after the debt was paid, it would belong to him. Waving his hand, Silen and the gray cat continued to dive deeper. As they continued to dive, Silen could clearly sense the energy ores wrapped inside the layer of rocks. He didn't know if it was because his genes had evolved to rank A under the influence of the red and black energy ores, but Scylla could also sense these energy ores. He hadn't said anything before, and everything had been guided by the gray cat. But in reality, Scylla could also sense the energy ores on this side. Maybe his senses weren't as clear as the gray cat's, but he had definitely sensed them and had a clear direction. Even Huimao didn't know about this. In the sixth team, Huimao was the only one who could clearly feel the energy ores. This way, Huimao's role would be highlighted, and the team would place Huimao in a higher position. Ah, it's here, it's here. But the quality will be better if we go further down. Huimao dived straight down. Scylla didn't stop until he was close to the bottom of the river. Scylla only stopped. The quality of the energy ores here was quite good. Although there were more down there, it wasn't necessary. You absorb it, I'll be on the lookout. Huimao's back was facing Scylla, and he looked at the huge object that was slowly approaching from the darkness in the distance. He was very excited. This thing that was approaching seemed to be quite tasty. Scylla used his bare hands to break open the hard outer layer of the rock. Slowly, a palm-sized area that was glowing with green light was revealed. Scylla placed his hand on the surface. The factors in his body had already begun to clamor. As soon as Scylla released the seal, the energy within the ore surged towards Scylla. The changes that happened to his body when he absorbed the energy were similar to before. The only difference was that the green energy ore could activate the AI chip to produce an optimal memory point that stimulated the human body to recover its vitality. In other words, if Scylla was in some kind of life-threatening situation, this memory point would be activated, and his recovery ability would obviously increase by a lot compared to before. The effects would also be much better. This time, Scylla absorbed the energy very quickly. When he opened his eyes, there was already a depression in the area where his palm touched. Sigh, I'll continue to let that cat take the blame for me. On land, Shoten looked at the data that the technician had obtained from the hole that Huimao had made. He didn't speak for a long time. However, he was extremely happy. After being suppressed for so long, he finally saw a gentle light. Whoosh! A 10-meter-long, strange-looking fish with dark green patterns on its body jumped out of the river. No, it was thrown out. When everyone took a closer look, they found that the tail of the big fish was gone. If it was whole, it would be at least 20 meters long. Green blood was still flowing. After it was thrown out, it was still churning. Huimao jumped out of the water and went straight for the big fish. It lay on top of it and continued to chew. As long as it was not dead, the meat was still fresh. Before the fish died, Huimao had to chew more. Looking at this cat and fish, such a sharp contrast in size and such a strange scene, everyone felt a chill run down their spine. As for whether this fish was thrown out by Scylla or some other reason, everyone had their own guesses. However, the most important thing now was to mine, so they didn't continue to think about these questions. After Scylla went ashore, he told Shoten about the situation at the bottom of the river. The bottom of the river is the territory of this big fish. Looks like we'll have to use some underwater tools this time. Yes, you've worked hard. Take a rest first. We'll go to the next stop in about an hour. The slightly larger specialized underwater tools were all on the starship. Shoten needed to make some arrangements. Scylla walked to the side of the big fish. Huimao's eating speed was like a locust passing by. Now, the big fish was no longer struggling and was on the verge of death. Scylla cut open the fish's belly and flipped it open to see what was inside. What are you looking for? Huimao licked its lips and stopped eating. It planned to catch another one when it had time in the future and eat it directly at the bottom of the river before coming up. I'm looking for something. Scylla continued to look without looking up. Chapter 105. Scylla used the foldable knife to look at the thing inside the fish's stomach. This big fish was completely dead, and its body was starting to change. Scyllin's hand paused, and a black shadow shot out from the fish's stomach. Scyllin's free hand grabbed it with lightning speed. It was a long thing that was as long as a finger. Its body was dark green, and it looked almost black at first glance. There was a big mouth on its head, and it let out a shrill cry that hurt people's ears. Many people who were busy turned their attention to Scyllin's hand. Wow, what is this? It looks like it tastes good. Hui Mao was planning to run to the side to sleep, but when he saw this thing, he ran back. If you want to eat it, look for it yourself. There's more inside, Scyllin said. Hui Mao sniffed the smell of this bug-like thing. He didn't care that it was dirty, and he went straight into the fish's stomach to look for food. What is this? Shotten walked over and asked. It should be a kind of parasite. I've seen some people find parasites on the bodies of deep-sea fish. Although this big fish is not in the sea, it's almost there. I heard that the parasites in the deep-sea fish are very powerful. Scyllin observed the struggling parasite in his hand, and he put a stone next to its mouth. Puff, a hole was bitten out of the stone. Everyone who saw this took a deep breath. Such a powerful thing was a parasite. If it lived in a human body, wouldn't it be dead? No matter how hard a bone was, it wouldn't be enough for it to chew. After Scyllin cut off its head with the knife, this thing still struggled for a while before stopping. It was obvious that it had a strong life force. Scyllin used the knife to rummage through the fish's stomach again. The parasites inside were almost eaten by Hui Mao. This guy was quite fast. Hey, wait, leave me some of that thing. Scyllin used the foldable knife to knock on Hui Mao's head. Hui Mao, who was about to take a bite, spat out the thing in his mouth. This thing tastes good. Of course, these are all things that absorb the host's essence. Scyllin stored the little green bean-sized balls into a special bottle. These balls were the eggs of the parasite he had encountered earlier. Hui Mao, who had been tossing and turning in the belly of the fish, was covered in the green blood of the big fish. Scyllin kicked him into the river to take a bath, and only allowed him to go ashore after he was clean. After arranging everything here, Shotten brought Scyllin and Hui Mao to the next team location. It was a land of ice and snow. It was also the coldest place on the planet. The area covered by ice and snow was also very wide. Hui Mao found two kinds of ores there. One was transparent, and the other was white. The transparent ice ore was a special kind of ore, not an energy ore. It could not provide energy, but this ore was very dense, and almost all of it was made up of water molecules. It was a high-density compressed water crystal. If it was turned into a liquid, its volume would expand by 50 to 100 times. If it was placed in an ultra-low temperature environment, it would absorb the ice in the environment, integrate, and slowly expand. It could be said that it was an excellent crystal for storing water. It was very useful for long-distance travel for the fleet. The other kind of white ore was indeed an energy ore. It could emit a cold light source, and objects that were illuminated by this cold light would be instantly frozen. Before this, there were only cold beam guns and airborne cold beam cannons, but there were no cold beam weapons that were more lethal and suitable for installation on starships. This white ore could achieve that effect, and the technical team was preparing to use this ore to develop a new cold weapon. Other than this spot, the energy ores at the other team's locations were about the same as before. That was why Hui Mao couldn't even be bothered to lick them. He was already sick of the taste. Everyone was very excited now that they knew the location of the ores. However, Scyllin did not participate in the mining. Instead, he returned to the starship and slept for 2 days. The energy he absorbed had greatly affected the chips inside his body. While his genes were evolving, Scyllin needed to control the changes and take the initiative. He could not allow these changes to happen willfully, or he might even turn into a monster when the time came. Shotten had already reported the matter of this planet to the A-Team, and the A-Team immediately sent people to the planet marked on the star map Shotten had given them. What the sixth team needed to do now was to mine while waiting for the A-team to arrive and hand the planet over to them. Then, they would proceed with the next step of their operation. Sector Z's planning mission hadn't been completed yet. Although these energy ores were enough to raise their influence in the vanguard, they had to finish what they had to. It had to be said that Schotten had chosen the right route back then. From the start of their voyage until now, other than some of their own kind at the outskirts of Sector Z, they had not run into a single hunter regiment for a long time the deeper they went. Right now, there was not a single exploration team like theirs that had come to the planet's surroundings. Sector Z was huge. No one could say for sure what they would encounter in the future, how many sacrifices they would have to make, and how much they would gain in the future. But no matter what, since they had made the choice, they had to keep going. During this time, the logistics team members seized the opportunity to replenish their food supplies. Only with energy and food supplies would they be able to travel more smoothly in the future. A technician had deduced a conclusion based on some parameter changes. Due to the effect of the energy field, there was a limit to the mining rate of the energy ores. There was a critical point to mining, which was also their equilibrium point. If this equilibrium point was broken, the planet would fall into chaos, and humans would not be able to stay on this planet for long. If it was serious, the planet's habitability would drop from rank B to rank C, or even lower. After sleeping for 2 days, Sylin returned to the planet. "Hey, Carrie, where's Sylin?" Beaver asked. The man who had slept for 2 days had actually disappeared. That guy has been obsessed with parasites lately, and he went looking for them with Engie. The moment he thought of those disgusting bugs, Carrie couldn't help but shudder. At this moment, Sylin was watching Engie dissecting a crab. This crab was something he had come across by chance at the green riverside. It was nearly 5 meters long, and its entire body was covered in thick green fur. At the side, Hui Mao was happily tearing off the crab's giant pincers. Engie picked out a bug from the crab's lungs. "Oh, I didn't expect to actually have one." Engie smiled as he picked out a bug. "I've only seen parasites in ordinary crabs, but I've never seen this one. But it should be about the same. We can study it when we have time. The infection rate and degree of this parasite are very high. They live in the lungs, stimulate and destroy the host's lung tissue, causing coughing and hemoptysis. Some even invade the brain and cause paralysis. The ones Engie mentioned were just the ordinary ones. The parasite he was holding was probably much more terrifying. We usually don't bring parasites onto the starship easily. The risk factor is too high, and if we lose control, the entire starship may die. Never underestimate these tiny things." As he was speaking, Sylin and Engie's communicators rang. Sylin turned on the communicator, and Carrie's big face appeared on it. "Sylin, the A-team is here. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.